2022 regularly scheduled board meeting. The meeting has been appropriately advertised. Roll call, please.
Sorry. Mr. Connor? Here. Mr. Chu is absent. Here. Oh, there you, oh, look at you. I have my head down. Mr. Chu's present. Mr. Craig?
Here.
Ms. Henry? Here. Ms. Mello? Yeah, here. Ms. Rivera is absent. Severino is absent. Ms. Sheridan Celia? Here. Mr. Stotts?
Here.
Mr. Bowman? Here. Mrs. Cady?
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There is no executive session this evening, so we move to Section 3, presentations. We've got quite a number of them, so we're going to start off with a presentation from a Girl Scout student health project. Anya, I'm going to let you pronounce your last name so that I don't get it wrong, but come on up and you can get started.
Hi everyone, so my name is Anya Rach. I am a senior at Haddon Heights Junior Senior High School, and tonight I'm here to talk to you guys about my Girl Scout Gold Award. So what is a Girl Scout Gold Award? So that is an 80-hour-long service project that benefits a group or community and tackles a specific issue. So my specific issue was period poverty and period shaming, and the group or community was my high school, which I have now extended to other high schools in my county. So what is period poverty and period shaming? So period poverty is not having access to resources or products while going through a menstrual cycle. So this can be caused by financial struggles or by a lack of products in that region, which is seen in a lot of third world countries. The other definition I want to talk about is period shaming, which is the direct or indirect shaming by society onto people for going through the natural process. So this is seen in comments, refusal to discuss the topic, or even the feeling of shame experienced by the individual. So let's stop talking about definitions and go straight to the facts. So in 2019, 1/5 of teens struggled to afford period products, 2/3 of U.S. women could not afford period products in 2019, and 33 U.S. states taxed period products as luxury necessities. New Jersey did not, which is nice. So that's a lot of real-world statistics. Let's talk about the specific schools. So overall, in the entire United States, 84% of students have missed class time or know someone who has missed class time because they did not have access to period products. So this meant that they had to leave their classroom, go to the nurse's office, or go find friends, and altogether take time out of their learning and education to go deal with this issue. I ran a survey at my own high school back in May of last year, and out of everyone that responded, 88% of those students said that they were also affected by some way in their period, which shows that this isn't just all of the United States statistics. It applies directly to the individual schools as well. So this problem is caused because students do not have access to their menstrual products. So in my school specifically, this meant that there are products available in the nurse's office, but the classes are on the opposite side of the building. Students felt uncomfortable talking about their personal hygiene with a stranger because many people haven't met the nurse before, or they just don't want to talk about it when there's other students in the room, which is the third point, that students feel socially anxious being around other students. So how did I approach this issue? How did my Girl Scout project attempt to fix this? So I got free pad and tampon access for all students at the school. So these are dispensers from the company and Flow, and these are in the past tense because this is a bit of an outdated presentation, but as of right now, they're located in 6 female restrooms at my school. That is all the female restrooms. We are installing them in the one gender-neutral bathroom this upcoming week, and they will be replenished by the company on a regular schedule. So what that means is that when we run out of all the pads and tampons, it is fulfilled by that company. So say if it takes us 3 months, 3 weeks, the company will then replenish that. So that was a lot about period poverty. I also want to talk about period shaming. So in my school, in my survey, around 35% said that they felt uncomfortable going to the nurse, and many cited the same reason. They felt awkward and uncomfortable. And then to support that, I have a couple of anonymous quotes from the survey. The students knew that it was anonymous, and they freely wrote this. So a lot of it is they feel the anxiety, they want other people to know. And then you see at the bottom, it's about the classes are on the other side of the school, and it's difficult to get to. So I'm going to move on. And then that was the direct feeling by the individual, but then there is also the feeling that others put onto you, especially the phrase, you must be on your period. It gives periods and menstrual cycles a negative connotation, and this isn't specifically, a guy saying this to a girl. It can be, mom saying it to their daughter, or even friends saying it to each other in a joking manner, but it still instills that negative feeling in the individual. So I'm sure you guys want to know the financials. How much did this cost at my school? So the total cost was $2,439. And I will say, when I originally proposed this project to my principal, I cited $2,500. We fell right under that budget, which was fantastic. And then you can see the individual breakdowns on there. It's pretty good. And then to review, the dispensers promoted period equity, and they made sure that everybody had free access to products while on their periods. Haddon Heights has many different socioeconomic levels, and many individuals at home didn't have access, and so these just make sure everybody has access in a safe public space. And then they also tackle period shaming by showing that they're shared experience and allowing people to feel comfortable in their own skin during a menstrual cycle, so they don't have to go walk into a stranger's office or discuss this in front of strangers. Is there any questions or comments? Feel free.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you first for coming out and speaking with us. This is an incredible amount of research, and for to come up and talk about this. This weekend, actually on Saturday, I was in Newark for a summit that Assemblywoman Shanique Spate launched around this specific topic of menstrual poverty and products. And I met the company that you mentioned, they have Flow.
Yeah.
And I think this is really interesting, and you're shaking your head, so I don't know if you've connected with her before.
Yeah, I have. I've connected with the CEO and a couple of different people on their team, spoken with them, met with them, so I'm pretty confident with them.
Specifically the Assemblywoman, she's about to put out one of the most comprehensive bill packages around this across the state, and I think the more voices that are speaking up about the importance of this is going to turn a lot of hearts and minds. So I commend you on what you're doing.
Thank you.
How did you go about getting funding for this project?
So the Board of Ed paid for this in full. It came from, there's two funds they can use. There's the activities fund and there's the other fund. I can't remember the specific name of it, but that's where it came from. So the school paid for it.
When you get a chance, I know you have our contact information. If you could send me the information about the vendor and everything, because I don't want to steal Dr. McDowell's thunder, but he met with some students at the high school last week, and this actually came up as a concern of theirs. So I know we already met as an administrative team to kind of figure out how we can start tackling it in Collingswood, so you can just give me that information. Yeah. Be helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
Was that her information?
No, that was the information.
Okay.
Company, yeah.
I would hope that you'll reach out to this young woman, because I'm sure you learned some things along the way that we would prefer not to have to learn the hard way. So if you could share that with us as well.
So I meant to spoke about this, but there has actually been no vandalism at all of these dispensers. This was a huge concern at my school because I'm sure like you, last year there was a lot of it, a lot of things in the bathrooms. But as of today, when I spoke to my principal, it's been a month and a half in the schools. There's been no vandalism. There's been no crazy use. There's been no writing on them, and I think that's really positive. And hopefully, that's also because students know that I did it. I haven't been shy about this, and so when they attach my name to it, they know that it's student-run. So there hasn't been any, which is good.
So that was actually going to be my question, was I guess the rollout to it. Was there some sort of, did everyone just at your school knew that this was a project that you were working on, so when they showed up, they knew about it? So perhaps that's where our student voice and student groups can come from. If we go down along those lines, would you recommend that, or do you think that is part of what prevented there from being any issues with it is that everyone was kind of on board with it because you had done the work to talk about the importance of it.
So these weren't like physically installed in the building until the summer because they arrived at the school the last week of June or last week of school, and you know, it's a crazy week, everyone wants to be out, so there wasn't really a point in installing them. And I had been like working on it in school. I sent out surveys, I ran a focus group at my school, an educational seminar about this, so people knew that I was doing it, but the majority of my school didn't, and then they just showed up in September. And I mean, I think either way really works, because like now students know that I'm doing it, they know that like they're there, and it's almost, I don't want to say girl code in a way, but like everybody knows that this was almost a gift, and they don't want that to be taken away. So I think either approach will work.
And as a former Girl Scout, I know how hard it is to get to the Gold Award, and
Yeah.
you should be very proud of yourself. It's a lot of hard work, so I commend you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to speak with us and putting all of this effort into this important issue.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Is it, on the shaming side,
Mhm.
did you happen to come across any, like, tips on curriculum or anything that can be taught to the students so that they're, I mean, adults are harder.
Yeah.
Like, I know it happens with students a lot.
Yeah, so I didn't focus on that aspect specifically, but what I did is in May of last year, I ran a optional educational seminar that students could attend. It was after school, and it was a condensed version of this presentation almost, but focused more on like period poverty and period shaming. And while doing research for that, I was looking at the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade curriculum of the elementary schools and just getting that education in younger instead of in the high schools, because it's discussed in the elementary school's curriculum, but it's just like what it is, not the societal impacts of it. So if you're looking to like focus on specific grades, I would say 3rd, 4th, and 5th is where I focus and where I would recommend focusing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
So I'm going to stay here because I know the other presentations are going to come up too. So next up, we have our German exchange program to share all of the wonderful things that are going on there.
So good evening, everyone. For those of you who might not know me, my name is John Ohlers, and I am the German teacher here at Collingswood High School. And I've been running the German exchange since 2005. I began here in the district in 2003, and at that point the program had already been set up by my predecessor, who has done it with the same town in Jülich, Germany since 1992. So we're on our 30th anniversary here right now. I'm very excited that we have German students with us at this time. And I know that Dr. McDowell is very excited that, again, we have this type of international relationship between our school and the school in Germany. So let me just tell you a couple quick things about the exchange in general. We're always able to take up to at least 25 of the Collingswood students over to Germany each year. We do it every other year, and then they're able to bring at least 25 kids here as well. So you can imagine this since 2005, just my tenure doing this. There have been a lot of kids from both sides who have had that experience. And I actually joke that among small towns and the fact that there's Jülich, which is about 24,000, Collingswood, about 15,000 or so, everybody on either side knows the name of those two places. So you walk around Jülich and everybody's like, oh yeah, Collingswood, Collingswood. It's like, who else knows Collingswood? Well, they all do over there. The kids who are here right now get a nice view of American life. They get to live with the students here in Collingswood, Oak Lynn, or Wood Lynn for 3 weeks, experience family life. The weekends are free for the families to take them on whatever adventures they would like to go on. And then we have different trips that we do. So for example, we go to New York one day. Tomorrow, as a matter of fact, we're going down to Washington, D.C. To see all the historic Capitol-related things with a tour of the Capitol included. The monuments, a little bit about U.S. history, etc. We've also done 2 days over in Philadelphia. One day was the historic day, again, just to show them all about American history and what's involved with that. And we did another day that was the art day. So the statues going all the way down to the art museum, etc. Today we were in Camden, for example. Lou Capelli, who many of you probably know, also sponsors that through the commissioners. So we go find out how county government works as well with a tour of the battleship. So it's such a great program, I think, to allow the German kids to see so much that's representative of the United States. And then conversely, I have my colleagues from Germany here. They show us all sorts of things about Germany. So where we're located is not too far from the city of Cologne, which is one that you've all heard of. We're also near the Dutch border. We're near the city of Aachen, which is the Charlemagne city. We learn a lot of the history of those areas of Germany. We get to do a lot of traveling and find out about different eras and times. And also, same thing. So the Collingswood students get to live with the students from Jülich, find out about German everyday life. And just like the German kids are shadowing the Collingswood kids here, the same thing happens. Even though we go in the summertime over there, Germans have a shorter summer. They only get about 6 weeks of vacation time. So we always catch either the end of their school year or the beginning of theirs. So our kids also get to shadow, see how their particular school is set up, you know, what the daily schedule is like and all that. And, you know, I just, again, think that the variety of things that they can see and experience is, you know, quite interesting for them. I've had many, many Collingswood parents over the years come back and say, wow, you know, Johnny or Susie, they are so much more mature now that they've been overseas. They had to make a lot of decisions for themselves and learn this, that, and the other, follow schedules, no parents around, etc. And as a lot of you may know, we also couple that in with the European tour. So I always vary that a little bit. We did Eastern Europe this past summer. We've done ones that have gone down into the Alps. We've gone down into northern Italy. We've been over in France, etc. So it gives them a nice smattering of other countries and cultures that they can, you know, figure out what's the same and what's different. So again, I don't want to belabor this point too much. My German colleagues I'll mention in a moment. But again, the idea of getting to know about another culture, the differences, the similarities, everything else is also a big part of the emphasis here that I think, you know, helps a lot of the young students learn about the world, and then it gives a lot of them that idea that, hey, I might actually use, whether it's either German or at least something through international relations later on in their lives. And just funny little facts here, for example, Mike Sinisi, who a lot of you know, also from Buildings and Grounds, he was in the very first exchange that went to Jülich back in 1992. He was very excited when he heard the Germans were here right now, and he brought in this photo album to show me and to show the Germans. That's how much it means to him even 30 years later. So just one small example of that. Also, my children went through the Collingswood School District. They both participated in the exchange, so I've had not only teachers at my house, but also I've had different German students at my house too, and I can just tell you personally how enriching that's been for our family over the years also. So again, I thank you very much for your support for this past exchange, and for some of you who've been on the board longer, for prior exchanges, and hopefully even for upcoming exchanges as well. First of all, I guess I'll stop here. Does anybody have any questions for me before I pass it on to some of the students? All right, well, at this point, I'd like to call up some of my students. Maybe I'll start with the college students first, and they're going to give you some of their firsthand impressions of what the exchange has meant to them, because, of course, they've experienced both sides of it. The German kids are only here through this Friday, so they've already, they, meaning the Collingswood kids, also already had their month between the tour we took and 3 weeks in Jülich. So they had their month abroad, and now they've had 2 weeks here, so they're going to tell you a little bit about their thoughts.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. I am Micah Anger. I am currently a junior at Collingswood High School, and as Herr Ohlers has already said, I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience on the German exchange. So first, I was fortunate to have a wonderful family. My partner here is in the room, and it was amazing being in a German family and just experiencing German culture in that sense. And in that place, I was able to experience everything and learn a lot more. And it was speaking, like trying new things like that, connecting with other people, connecting with people that I even hear, even other Collingswood students I don't always talk to. I would have conversations with, and I grew friendships and bonds that I think will last for a while. And then an understanding of a different culture. It's very different, as you can imagine, in Europe. And seeing a new perspective is changing, like it changes your state of mind and your perspective on everything, and it really helps you grow. And the learning is a lot of learning that I do here is in the school setting. It's all the textbooks and facts and information. But the emotional learning, I think, was the biggest part that I experienced in Germany. Learning about what I've said earlier, speaking other languages. I see learning not as something that's a linear path for me. It always grows at different points, and there's parts where I'm more stagnant in my growth, but I think that I was able to learn a lot in my time because of the different opportunities I had in Germany. I had more opportunities to speak, to see new people, to find new friends, and it was just really exciting. So I think finding and learning how to be more independent, how to grow by myself, how to be more mature, hopefully, and how to gain more confidence. It really was an amazing experience in that thing. And in that sense, I also had the opportunity to try so many new things. And there's so many opportunities, whether it's speaking, whether it's like going on my first train ride when we were going to Jülich, there was an older German lady that was next to me. And I tried to start a conversation, and then I messed up my grammar and didn't speak to her for the rest of the ride. But I won't regret that because I still had the chance to do it, and I still try to do it, and that was what it was all about. And I don't think I'll regret anything I did on the exchange. Everything I did, I'm happy with. I was authentic. I was myself. I'm so glad for everything I tried to do. So yeah, and I think being part of the exchange, it's important because it's a part of the legacy. It's important. My brother did it twice. I've done it once. You really understand what it means to be part of something bigger and to learn more and to grow more. So yeah, it's amazing. It's such a great opportunity for me, hopefully for my siblings. And yeah, it's a huge part of the past of Collingswood High School, and I hope it continues to be a part of the future for students to come. And next, I think it's Audrey Bosniak, who's hopefully gonna wow us all with her amazing speech. Thank you.
Hi, Board of Ed. I'm Audrey. I'm a senior at CHS. He's running off to soccer. It's funny that he talked about trying to talk to an old woman on the train. I also had a brief exchange with a businessman next to me asking if I could use the outlet under the seat. So the exchange has been awesome. I've always kind of been jealous of Spanish students who get to be exposed to the language they're learning like all the time because of how many Spanish speakers we have here in America. But it's really not often that you hear or see German, like ever. So like visiting the country and living in a German household with my lovely partner was like so shocking. Like we kept joking, oh, like Errol's was right, it's a real language, he didn't make it all up, like German is real. He didn't lie about any of the cultural differences or the things that we have in common. And obviously, aside from the linguistic benefits, it was so interesting to see the way that kids our age are educated in another country, and now that they're here, seeing what they think of American culture. It's pretty fun. And like Errolers and Micah were talking about how it's such a tradition. Lily's, I don't want to steal her talking points, but her mom and like her aunts were all here in Collingswood when they were in high school. So it was just fun to talk with them about like her mom stayed right on Knights Park, and what they remember about the town. So it's just really an awesome tradition, and I'm excited for my sister to go on the exchange, and hopefully my German has improved. I would definitely say it has. Just reading signs and like trying to comprehend what they're spewing at me is like, it's so much fun. So yeah, thank you. I think we're gonna move on to the Germans now. Ben is Micah's partner, so he's gonna come up and speak.
All right. Hello. I'm Ben. I'm a German exchange student currently in the US. And all in all, I would say that the exchange is like definitely a huge part of my life. I've seen many things, even though you would think maybe that the two countries, both kind of Western cultures, are quite similar. They're really not. I feel like Americans, I don't want to generalize, but they've been really nice to me. For example, just in shops, they just, when you come in, they greet you. I've never seen that in Germany. Everyone's very welcoming here. I've had great experiences with Micah in my family. I know that my mother loved it, my dad loved it, my twin brother loved it, my grandma loved it. She tried to speak English, although not so well. But yeah, and I mean, me being here now in the US, you see a lot through media, but actually experiencing it is a totally different thing. Visiting New York, which we did, it was a crazy experience for me. I've never seen skyscrapers in my life. And other than that, I mean, you don't just have the personal experiences, but also there are practical advantages you can get from it later in life. Like you can put it on your CV. It kind of shows independence. It shows determination to something. It builds your language skills, obviously. So I think it really was a great thing to experience here. And yeah. All right, now on to Linus.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm also a German exchange student. And for me, the exchange is just a great opportunity to get to know Americans, to get to know the American culture, hopefully make connections that last even longer than the exchange. And I feel like that could really be the case because we met some people who also participated in the exchange maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and they told us they still have pictures or still be in contact with some others from that time, Germans and Americans, of course. And for me, it's like really nice because right now I'm in a situation I've never been in before, like talking in front of so many people. And it's just that, like getting or have to adapt to new situations quickly and maybe situations you've never been in before and especially will never be in school or be in school. And yeah, it's really that for me to get this experience, the American experience. Yeah. I don't want to repeat everything the other teachers already told us, so I'm going to have it off to Lily, I think, quickly. But thank you.
Okay, hello, my name is Lily. I'm 16 years old, and Audrey is my partner. And like she already told you that my mother went on the exchange, and I actually met her exchange partner when I was like 6. I kind of remember it, and my mother always tells me about her exchange, and so I was very excited to actually experience it as well. And so it was a very interesting experience. I loved to learn about the history of America. Like, we talked about the history in our classrooms, obviously, but to see all the objects, like we visited the Liberty Bell, it was very impressive. So just see the history we learned about in real life was very interesting. And also meeting many new people and making friendships. So I hope that my little brother can experience this as well.
I'll add one thing back in here before my colleagues from Germany come up, as a few of the comments were here. I think also part of the legacy, as I mentioned, about friends and relatives, and in her case, even her mother was here, for example. So through my predecessor, one of the local South Jersey German teachers is a Collingswood graduate, and also one of my students is also a German teacher here in South Jersey. Plus, I've had other students that have had internships in Germany after they graduated from here and were in college, et cetera, and many of those are still in contact with their friends in Jülich and have gone back many times, back and forth. I've run into German kids up on Haddon Avenue that I didn't even know were going to be here in the summertime. It was like, oh, you're here right now. Like, oh, hi, Harolders. And it's just so crazy. Again, just the bonds that have been made through that, and again, these connections and how German has become an important part of some of their lives. So at this point, let me introduce my colleagues from the school in Germany. I'll have them introduce themselves.
Well, hello, I'm Sophia. I'm one of the German teachers. I'm here with my colleague Alex. And first of all, thanks for having us tonight to talk about the exchange, which already has such a long tradition. Sorry. And represents the German-American friendship and partnership as well. It's an essential part of our self-understanding as a school, as an open-minded and diverse school that takes these kinds of experiences as a chance to grow. And Jülich recently talked to former participants of the exchange who also stressed how much they got from this cultural encounter. To give you some examples, some of them went to study abroad. Some of them are still in touch with their exchange partners or their host families, which also shows how many long-lasting friendships are a part of one possible outcome from the exchange. Some of them are becoming English teachers right now or study international business, as they could really engage with the English language and culture.
Yeah, many things have been said already, and we think that it is, well, of very high importance to stick to these exchange programs, especially in times of xenophobia and growing intolerance, as students actually learn to appreciate similarities and differences between themselves and others. Plus, at the same time, students, they have kind of a very special insight, so to say, and they really learn that a tolerant, open-minded, and diverse society is something, that can be called or can be seen as an asset that needs to be actively protected. So thank you once again for all your support, and let's hand over back to Mr. Oehlers. Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions after all the little presentations then?
So one
yes.
quick,
yes.
one quick, just want to add, first and foremost, we'd just like to publicly thank Mr. Oehlers and all of the volunteers that helped make this possible. We would like to thank our guests from Jülich, and one of the things that kind of stuck out to me was when they went to one of our elementary schools, and the older students were able to synthesize culture, language, their exchange experience for 4th and 5th graders, which is not an easy task. So for that, thank you. Also want just to publicly acknowledge that I had the opportunity to go to Oktoberfest last week. There were 270 participants from 4 different school communities participating and celebrating. So when our German colleagues talk about a diverse and inclusive environment, I just wanted to acknowledge that we had students from Palmyra, Haddonfield, Washington Township, Collingswood, and ultimately Germany, all in the same space at the same time, celebrating culture and diversity. And just wanted to publicly acknowledge that. So thank you.
Thank you as well. Yes, question.
Yeah, I know it's a one-for-one exchange. Those of us whose kids are well past that option, how can the community get involved to support the program?
Ooh, that's a good question. Wow, I mean, I guess we could try to do even more fundraising and things like that. The Oktoberfest that Dr. McDowell just mentioned has always been our big fundraiser, actually. And as you know, how much prices have gone up as we have to get luxury buses to go up to New York or down to D.C., and even just what it costs to get a school bus to take us back and forth to the airport is ridiculous. But thankfully, the Oktoberfests have been able to cover that so far. Obviously, if we get into a pinch at some point, perhaps if any of you have certain connections within the community, I would certainly be very welcome to sit down with any of you and find out how we can actually increase our monetary base to make sure that we're not shortchanged at some time in the future. So fortunately, with the amount of activities we have planned and what we can, logistically fit into the time span, it's worked out okay so far, but you never know going forward, obviously. So, but thank you for that question. So that would be of help in the future, perhaps.
Monetary or also if there are career options that non-parents can...
Yes, exactly, right. As I've mentioned before, we're able to take up to 25 kids. I have a couple less than that this year, but there's always that possibility that people within the school, just if they have interest, they wanted to host somebody for that time period, would always be welcome to do that as well. So that would also be of great support. So yes, any other questions, comments? If they elect to also do the trip that we add on, that's through a tour company up in Boston called EF Tours, and that is the main responsibility. So that also includes the flights back and forth. So part of it overlaps with what we do in ULISH. As for what's done here, it's basically reciprocity, in the sense that you figure the Collingswood families are feeding the German kid, giving them a place to stay, taking them on some excursions on the weekends, etc. And then through reciprocity, that all happens then to their own children over in ULISH. So for the most part, you could say it's kind of a win-win. It's even on both sides. The main thing out of pocket, of course, would be for the travel portion of it. The Oktoberfest money is basically so I don't have to hit up the Collingswood parents for anything else. So in other words, it's a large enough outpouring of money to do that trip, but for us to do everything else for the Germans in this country, that's all through the fundraising. So yeah, there would certainly be other ways, maybe back to the original question, if we were able to also somehow defray some of the costs of the overall trip, that might even allow a few more families to get involved with the overall exchange experience. Mm-hmm. Anything else? All right, well, once again, oh, yes.
No,
yes.
I just wanted to thank all of you for coming, and this is an incredible program, and the deep history of all of it, it just makes it even more special for this town. So thank you very much for taking the time to come and present to us, and just, as someone who doesn't love public speaking in their native language often, just the fact that you all came up here and spoke in a second or, more than second language, depending on how many you speak, is very, very impressive. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us.
And again, thank you very much for your continued support. And like I said, planning on doing this for many years, and it's been my pleasure to do this since 2005. So thanks for giving me that opportunity and the approval for all these years. So we'll end our little section here with an Auf Wiedersehen.
So, Mr. Gersick, I feel like repeatedly you've had to follow like an amazing student performance or act with the school safety report, but we appreciate that that you're willing to take one on the chin every time. So, Mr. Gersick is here to present the student safety data system report for the last period of last school year.
Thank you. Yes, not as exciting as our German exchange program, which Mr. Ehrolers runs beautifully every year. Every year, twice a year, we need to report the SSDS results, which is the Student Safety Data System results, which totals up for our district, all the schools, any issues of violence, vandalism, harassment, intimidation, bullying, anything related to weapons offenses, substance offenses, and other instances that end up being having a child removed or suspended from school. So this is a summary of what occurred from January of last year, 2002, to the end of last school year in June. So we had a total of 15 investigations district-wide, 5 of which became HIB official incidents. And I'm going to explain HIB more detail after I run through these numbers with you. For this, from January on, there was 5 additional HIB trainings. This current year, I attended a workshop where they encouraged us to meet with any groups that are doing after-school activities in our buildings, also meet with them and educate them on HIB. So I'll be doing that for all of our groups that meet on a regular basis after school. Summary of HIB programs, we had 35, which brings up issues with students' relationships, improving school climate. HIB programs run a majority of the time throughout the school year. At the elementary school, in addition to our normal programs, we have Second Step, our law enforcement against drugs, which is sponsored by the Collingswood Police Department. Also read-alouds with HIB themes. At the secondary, we have many groups that deal with issues, hoping to educate students on harassment, intimidation, and bullying, including our Student Voice program, our Social Justice Club, and our Kindness Club. And then at the bottom, there was a number of total instances of 50, which consisted of 33 that had violence, 3 vandalism, no weapons, 14 substance, and 5 HIB confirmed. And as far as HIB is concerned, I wasn't prepared the last time we spoke about this. Oh, Patrick? Oh, there we go. Okay. So last year, I did the presentation for the beginning of the school year, and it was brand new to the position. So I've put together a couple slides on what HIB is. Not too many. HIB, which stands for harassment, intimidation, and bullying, it means any gesture, written, verbal, or physical, or electronic communication, which can also be a single incident or a series of incidents that's reasonably perceived as being motivated either by actual or perceived characteristics such as race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, or mental, physical, or sensory disability, or any other distinguishing characteristic. It takes place on school property, at any school-sponsored function, or on a school bus, or off school grounds, which I'll talk about in the last bullet. It usually causes a substantial disruption or interferes with the orderly operation of school and the rights of other students, and that a reasonable person who's doing these issues should know that under the circumstances that they will have an effect on the person that they're bullying, harassing, or intimidating, either a physical or emotional harm to that student, or damaging student property, or placing the student in reasonable fear of physical or emotional harm to his person or damage to his property. Or it could have an effect of insulting or demeaning any student or group of students, or creates a hostile environment for the student by interfering with the student's education, or by severely or persuasively causing physical or emotional harm to the student. On the newer side, we are investigating HIBs that are off school grounds if substantially disrupts or interferes with the orderly operation of school or the rights of other students. And what that basically means is if a child feels like something is occurring to them and they have a fear of going to school, or their parents have a fear of them going to school and keep them home, we consider that disrupting the environment of that child's learning. So that's one of the things we look for when determining if it's HIB or not. So one of the questions I was asked was, what determines an HIB? And I didn't have the paperwork with me. There's 3 categories: learning environment, distinguishing characteristics, and they're all listed there, anywhere from age, color, it could be your weight, your gender, religion, and then also the effect of the behavior, and we discussed that in the definition where it may have child may have a reasonable fear of the person or fear of coming to school. So we're constantly working and educating our students and staff to talk about their issues. If something's different, like our German exchange students, a perfect example, they're different. There's nothing wrong with a difference, but we need to educate ourselves and educate others on those differences so that everyone's accepted and that no one is bullied, harassed, or intimidated. And that's the end of my presentation. Any questions from the board?
Thanks, Mr. Gersick. I just had a question about the report itself. When the total number of incidents, said total number of incidents 50, but number of incidents leading to removal 128.
Yes, that's all suspensions. That could be for cutting detentions over and over again, dress code violations where they continued not to dress, insubordination, which isn't a violence issue, but it could lead, something like that could lead to suspension. Yep, absolutely.
Is insubordination is classified as violence?
No.
No, okay.
No.
Thank you.
So what is classified as violence? Is it specifically fighting?
Mainly physical fighting, anything leading, verbal that leads to escalation, where they're screaming, that falls under the violence category.
And then I had a question about at the secondary level, the programs, the elementary level, those are all programs that will touch all students, but the secondary, while those are all fabulous programs, they don't. Do we have any programs that do kind of speak to, or that all students will hear about?
They do. We're constantly, we just had, the state police came in and did a cyberbullying demonstration for all the middle school students this year, and they're coming back to do the high school students. So there's programs throughout in health and PE. There's programs that discuss it. We try to interweave it into the curriculum because there's so much that has to be taught.
Any other questions for Mr. Gersick? All right, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Patrick.
And next we have Mr. Yamamoto, who will give us the district test report.
Hi everyone. Tonight I'm presenting the district test report. It's for NJSLA from last year, as well as DLM and Access. And I'm going to go through what all those three tests are. So the NJSLA is a state assessment for students in grades 3 through 9 and 11. Basically determines if students are college and career ready. And for ELA, they go for grades 3 through 9. For math, it's actually 3 through 8, and then some of the courses, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. For science, it hits more like bands, so grade 5, 8, and 11 is when they'll be testing. The DLM is an alternate test to the NJSLA. It basically targets students who have an IEP in that top 1% who are most significantly intellectually disabled. It is the same content areas and basically the same grade spans as well. The Access test is for ELL students. It basically tests their English proficiency. It assesses speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And if they have an overall score of 4.5 on the assessment, then it is possible they could be exited from the program. All right, so before I get into some numbers, there is what they call end-size reporting, which basically means that if there is a group or subgroup that has less than 10 students in it, I'm not allowed to share that information. Okay. So let me just start off with the Access. The Access test has 6 performance levels. For our results, we had about 20% in 20% of ELL students at elementary schools get a 4.5 or higher, and the high school had about 15%. Now, they test every year, and students will come in, some students may have been here 3 years, some of them just may have been here 1 year. Here's just a quick breakdown of the ELL student groups. So in terms of gender, the parts I shaded really is just showing that 22% females scored a 4.5 or higher, and for males it was like 8%. And I've also included the economically disadvantaged group as well as race and ethnicity. And looking at the DLM has 4 performance levels. We're hoping students fall in the advanced or at target range. So looking at the DLM results, we do have a percentage of students who actually reach those levels. About 38% reached at target in ELA, and 18% reached it, or at least advanced or at target in math. For science, we had, since it's only grades 5, 8, and 11, again, that's the reason why I couldn't show. The subgroup was just too small to show. For the NJSLA performance levels in science, they have 4 levels. Again, we're looking for students making proficient or advanced proficient. The magic cutoff level, if you look on the table, is 200. In Collingswood, 5th grade, so what I shaded there was showing that our 5th graders surpassed the state average. Our average in 8th grade was very close to the state average. And we do have a little bit of work to do in 11th grade where we were below state average, but a little more significantly. Not terrible, but we do have some work to do. Here is just the NJSLA student groups for science, the subgroups. Right? The yellow and blue bands are for gender. I believe it's about like a 12% difference or achievement gap in gender. The green and tan table or chart is for the socioeconomic group. The third chart or table is for race and ethnicity. And the last one is for students with disability. Actually, interestingly enough, that last chart, students with 504 accommodations actually scored higher than students without. And I'm viewing it as that our accommodations are actually working.
So Windsor, can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
So for the science ones, looking at can you go back to the one that just shows, that's great that, that's good that we're doing better for 5th grade in science, but what does that tell us about 8th and 11th grade that those scores are below average? Like, what are we doing with that information now?
So it is something that has obviously come to our attention. I'm working with the science or the STEM supervisor. We are looking at, science curriculum isn't due for rewriting till the following year, but we are looking at kind of the topics. One of the issues with the junior year science test is that, so we have courses, biology, chemistry, physics, but on the science test, they actually ask earth science questions, which the last time they have that was in middle school. So that is an area that we need to discuss to figure out how to kind of incorporate some of that information so that they are more familiar with that type when they take this test. But that is one area. So some schools actually have science classes that are just like, here's freshman science, junior or sophomore science, and so on. All right. Oops. No. Okay. All right, so for the NJSLA performance levels for language arts and math, there are actually 5 levels. Not sure why the state decided to go 5 with these courses and only 4 with science, but that's okay, I guess. So we're looking for students making level 4 or level 5. So again, comparing the average between Collingswood and New Jersey, this is for language arts. We see that from grades 3 through 7 that we surpassed New Jersey's average. We were very close in 8th grade. And again, just a little off in the, as freshmen. As we look at math, from grades 3 through 6, we surpassed state average. Again, 7th grade was close. We do have to work with 8th grade, but I do go over some slides telling us some of the changes that we're doing in Collingswood. Algebra 1 was close. Geometry was surpassed by quite a bit. And even though I couldn't tell you what Algebra 2, the percentage is, we were quite a bit higher than the state average. Again, looking at subgroups for language arts and math, language arts is on the left side, math is on the right. We did kind of fall along stereotypical lines where females did better in language arts and males did better in math. For the socioeconomic, ELA and math, there is a gap between students who are economically disadvantaged and those who are not. More for math and language arts. For race and ethnicity, as we look at the comparisons, again, this does kind of fall along what we've had in the past, where white students do surpass Hispanic students than who surpass black students. And finally, this is subgroups for students with accommodations. Again, if we look at the 504 students, they actually are doing very well with students who don't have any accommodations. And also just remember that the NJSLA are on grade level tests. So if the content is, like if you're taking an 8th grade language arts test, it is 8th grade standards. So students with IEPs are taking those kind of tests. Oops, sorry, yep.
Are some of the people that would be in the yellow bands, nope, this is the other test. This is not the test for the significant learning disability.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And just that the significant learning disability, that DLM test, it only is, like I said, about 1% of the population. So it is a very small percentage of our students who actually qualify for that test. So in terms of summary findings, if like this will be posted in the on our website eventually. So if you're the kind who likes to look at the end of the book, this is pretty much what it is. So we've talked about 1 through 5 already, but I would like to say for number 6, I did go back and look at the average scores of achievement gaps between this year and 2019, and they actually were pretty similar. All right, so what are we doing, though, to improve these scores, even more so? All right, so here are learning acceleration strategies. One of the things that we're working with, or we continue to work with, is Hattie's visible learning strategies. Right? So each school has an acceleration plan and a SIG that will incorporate these visible learning strategies to improve scores. In math, we have a new math program at the elementary level. All right, it's called Into Math. This program has a diagnostic test that is better than what we've had in the past, as well as there are more supports and resources for students who struggle. At the elementary level, we've also incorporated learning acceleration specialists and MTSS coaches. Right? At the secondary staff, we have dedicated PLC times that will actually allow teachers to collaborate with each other. Also at the secondary level, we have STEM labs for math, which offers more of a differentiated approach. So we're hoping for like that 7th grade that was close but not above state average, and that 8th grade that was a little below, that these classes will actually help them. One of the areas we saw in language arts was that we struggle a little bit with informational text. So the goal at the secondary level is to push more informational text strategies or how to understand informational text better in social studies classes. Our district has created a data team to review data and share this information with the different schools. We have a new Galileo benchmark for math and science at the secondary level. And we continue to use a literacy program called Common Lit, and that's grades 3 through 12, which also offers benchmark information. And we are continuing with having SAT Day, which also provides additional data for us to look at. As I said, this is going on the website, so here are some additional sites that parents can take a look at. And I think that's it. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Me? Okay. I didn't see strategies there, so I don't know where they exist, that specifically talk to students on an IEP. I would have assumed that if students on IEPs are receiving the supports that they need, we shouldn't see such a big difference. But I don't see a strategy specifically targeting what's happening with the IEP learners.
I will talk, that's a good point. I will talk with CST and see if there are other strategies that we can incorporate in their IEP plans. It is expected that there should be a gap because if students have the same or pass scores or on the same level as students, then they really don't need to have an IEP anymore. But so I would always expect some type of gap between students who have IEPs and students who don't. And some of those, I'm sorry, go ahead. Just not as large.
I would expect a gap, but that's a big gap.
Okay. Well, again, this is stuff that we share during admin, so I can share with the CST team.
I'm just wondering, because the gap in socioeconomic, like none of this is news. As you said, the 2019 scores and 2022 scores, it all's kind of the same. So new benchmark assessments, those sorts of things are great, but what are we doing to really target the fact that we have this known group of students that aren't being served by what we've been doing in the past? Is that where the learning acceleration part comes in? How does that come in the middle school and high school, however, where the scores are kind of the most stark?
Right. So one of the parts of our strategic plan is to deal with equity. We are, like I said, in our data teams, we are looking at information to try to narrow down facts to help us really have a better understanding of why these gaps exist. We do have a program called Tableau, which is a data analytics program. It is one that like the Navy uses this program. It is something that does take a little bit of time to get an understanding of, but it does allow us to actually tease out information in terms of students with who have a disadvantaged socioeconomic life versus those that don't, and we can hopefully find information to see why they aren't being as successful.
Let me be a bit more concrete. So the answer is yes. In response to your question, we made the determination, especially coming back from the pandemic, that we knew that there were going to be some pervasive gaps, especially related to socioeconomic differences, but where we chose to invest was more into foundational development. So what you're going to hear and see tonight during Committee of the Whole is a breakdown of that core emphasis around small group instruction, differentiated instruction with an emphasis on MTSS, which is targeted intervention, and then learning acceleration, which is more personalized, data-driven instruction to all students at the elementary level. We knew that during the strategic planning process, we would need to do not a major overhaul, but a restructuring around secondary education aligned with the development of our portrait of a graduate. What this means, so what we referenced earlier, looking at some of the data around students in middle school seeing earth science, for example, there are very specific things that we can do to remediate that through the program of study, through the integration of earth science concepts, through the integration of environmental science concepts and biological concepts into the curriculum. What we have done in order to move in that space is the establishment of targeted PLCs with PLC leaders that are leading some of those discussions, picking apart the standards, and then helping to better equip. What we will also need to do is we will need to realign our program of study. We will need to realign our college and career readiness framework. We will need to realign our academic programming to the new portrait of a graduate, in addition to aligning it with where the data is telling us where we need greater levels of emphasis. So that work will be taking place this year. Because we opted with the resources that we had to make sure that we were getting out in front from a more foundational perspective. So we placed heavier emphasis pre-K to 5, and then we're trying to mitigate middle and high school, but we're just not there yet.
And so for current students, because what I was thinking of is it seems to me that the teachers really are the ones that need even more support as well on how to address the various needs in their classrooms. That I imagine are just getting greater with time. And so the PLCs is where, for this year especially, a lot of that is being addressed so that teachers can kind of take those strategies and turn them around in their classrooms.
So we're now in year 2 with what we're calling our continuous improvement process, which happens at the administrative level. So we have been building the capacity, the data literacy capacity of our principals and supervisors for now year 2, really digging deeper into data, being very targeted and specific, aligned with discrete skills that students need, both at the elementary and at the secondary level. This year also marks year 2. We're going a bit deeper in the PLC model, especially at the secondary level, which is making sure, for one, that we're looking at the right data, but 2, do our educators actually have time to look at data, to talk about data, and then inform their instructional planning? And that's also being facilitated. So we're moving in that general direction where we had to reset and reestablish the data inquiry cycle, where what are we looking at, when are we looking at it, and what are we doing about it? And then specifically, do our teachers actually have time with this new information in order to plan and replan and plan again in order to be able to meet that needs? Paired with the curriculum changes, the structural changes that will also need to take place, and then just further investigation into what strategies were most effective and which ones were not, aligned with the learning strategies that have been adopted by the middle and the high school, which is integration of prior knowledge, summarization, and ultimately deliberate practice. So those are the 3 targeted student learning strategies that they started emphasizing last year, paired with the stat literacy piece, and they're going to reinforce those concepts again this year while we get deeper into the data literacy. So we're getting better at making sure we're looking at the right things at the right time.
Are we working with, I mean, obviously there's a shared superintendent relationship with Oakland, but with Woodland we have students that are coming in. Are we sharing this information with them and working with the Woodland School District? Some of this is assessing prior curriculum materials, so I'm just curious how that works together.
So currently we're trying to improve that relationship. I'm trying to improve the partnership. So I have reached out with the leadership, and we're going to be seeking additional opportunities to be more integrated in our approach, especially with those students as they matriculate, leaving 8th grade, moving into 9. But we still have a lot of work to do.
Do we have any other questions?
Yes. First, just a comment that there's a lot of information in here, and to be able to react to it and ask meaningful questions, we need to see these reports before the day of presentation. We had committee meetings last week. We talked through all these things. I think having it a week before so that we could come in with educated questions would be appropriate. When I'm looking at this and I'm seeing that we still have the same achievement gaps that we had in 2019, and I look at some of what these gaps are, it's very concerning. And so one of my questions is, when you say that, are you saying that it's still at the same grade level when I look at NJSLA and our, I think it was 6th grade ELA, our black students, 14% are meeting or exceeding expectations? Is that the same, or are we saying when they were in 4th grade, they were still?
I took a rough average of, so because we haven't tested in a couple years, you didn't see any like groups that travel like for a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade over the years. But when I say the same, what I did is I took basically a rough average of the achievement gaps for all the grade levels, and that percentage was equivalent to each other.
Sure. I think. We also have 5 elementary schools, and then obviously Oak Land. How are our schools doing in comparison to each other?
Depending on some of the areas, are you talking like per grade level or per?
Let's look at NJSLA scores across our elementary schools. Where are we seeing that our kids are exceeding and doing great, and where do we need to be doing the most work, and how is that informing your conversations with teachers, with PLCs, on how to use this data effectively?
Well, like I said, overall, we surpassed state for in grades 3, 4, and 5. When we are talking to individual schools at this moment. Like this morning, we spoke with Garfield and Newby and looked at scores for like NJSLA, Start Strong, and some of the other benchmarks. So we are talking with them individually about areas where they can focus their instruction because the standards that the test assessed were a little lower than like the district.
Are we looking at comparative districts at all, or are we only looking at the state? Because the gaps in the state of New Jersey are pretty vast in terms of highest achieving schools and the factors there and some of the lowest achieving. So I'm just curious, with districts that mirror our population, our social and economic status, things like that, do we have any information on where we stand
At
there?
this time, we don't have any information on like similar districts.
Okay.
To follow up on Matt's question, do you use this data at each individual elementary level? Do you work with them? I think that's what you're trying to get at.
Yeah,
You mean across the elementary schools as opposed to each individual school,
Well,
correct?
do
Like
you dig
3rd
in
grade
with
across
each,
the...
like someone at Garfield and someone at Sharp, those schools, I mean, do you target them individually? Because there may be a big discrepancy between scores on one school versus the other, or is everything looped into one big bucket?
No, so the district test report is basically, like you said, one big bucket. But one of the things that we've done is form like a data team, which we are actually going to each of the individual schools and looking at their own individual information in terms of what standards were you successful with, and what standards do you need a little more improvement. There is reports from the NJSLA that actually give us that information in terms of the questions and the standards, so we can actually look at how did your school compare to the district. If your school scored low for one area, like why did it score low? So there is information that we are looking at specifically.
Any other, go ahead, Roger.
Looking at the NJSLA math score breakdown and the trends in terms of proficiency in the different grade levels, it seems, even statewide, there's a drastic decrease in proficiency percentage starting in 8th grade, or in 8th grade, right, from 7th to 8th grade. What's the theory?
Why does that happen?
Yes, what's the theory behind why that happens?
Basically, the reason why that happens is because in 8th grade level, a lot of schools also, or a lot of 8th graders will take the Algebra 1 test. So if you think about your 8th grade population, like the top, let's say 50% are taking the Algebra 1 test, which then falls into the Algebra 1 score bucket. And then the remaining students of 8th grade take the 8th grade level test.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And then looking at the report here, it's presented in terms of like the binary, right? Either it's folks who have met expectations or not, and I'm curious to understand how we're doing for the students who have been measured as not having met expectations. Is it that we're skewed and we're top heavy towards levels like 2 and 3, or do we have a big chunk of students that are closer to level 1, right? Because I think that's a very different picture of what's happening.
Right. I would have to go back and, I can, if you would like the information, I can go back and find the percentages of levels 1, 2, and 3 to see how they fell out, or how they fall. I can do that.
Thank you. And our final presentation of the evening is Dr. Principato is going to give us a presentation on the Gifted and Talented program.
Good evening. Tonight I'm going to present the elementary school Gifted and Talented programs. What is our purpose? This year we modified our support staff to include multi-tiered system of support coaches, otherwise known as MTSS coaches, and learning acceleration specialists, otherwise known as LASs. Their goal is to accelerate the learning of all students. Among other responsibilities, the MTSS coaches assist in the development of individualized learning acceleration plans needed for students in a variety of settings, including gifted and talented. The MTSS coaches also provide direct instruction to our 5th grade students identified through our Gifted and Talented guidelines. The learning acceleration specialists work with the classroom teachers to plan and deliver instruction in literacy and math in the classrooms. They also provide direct instruction to our K through 4 students identified through our Gifted and Talented guidelines. As part of our Gifted and Talented process for this year, we have modified our G&T entrance criteria to align it with our district-approved and updated post-COVID assessments. In addition, we are beginning a 2 to 3 year process of examining our Learning Through Enriched Academic Projects program, otherwise known as LEAP, ensuring that it complies with the Strengthening Gifted and Talented Education Act signed by Governor Murphy. What are we doing and why? First, we replaced the Imagine Math assessment entrance criteria with the Into Math growth measure assessment because our district no longer supports the Imagine Math program. The Into Math growth measure assessment is an adaptive assessment that provides critical information to help guide small group instruction. Secondly, in appropriate grade levels, we've included a universal screener, which we will refer to later, the OLSAT 8, as part of the entrance criteria to better identify gifted students services, thank you, outside of the general education grade level curriculum to advance their learning. So what is our elementary gifted and talented program? First, it's small groups with enrichment instruction that goes beyond the existing curriculum. For example, a project in our kindergarten program, build a shelter to keep you and your family dry. Choose from the available supplies. You will be given a paper family that must fit inside your shelter. Water will be dripped onto the shelter to test whether or not it will keep your family dry. Stick to your budget of $10. Be creative. Another example taken from the second grade. Students survey the entire building with a question of their choice. Students learn how to collect, organize, and graph data. So our kindergarten and first grade receive 30 minutes per week of instruction. Students in second through fifth grade receive 60 minutes per week, and how that time is implemented depends on the school. Some schools will have one block of 60 minutes. Others may have 2 blocks of 30 minutes, while others may have 3 blocks of 20 minutes. So the entrance criteria for our kindergarten. Kindergarten students will receive whole class instruction by the Learning Acceleration Specialist for the first 20 minutes of the session. Kindergarten students may be selected to receive the last 10 minutes of small group enrichment instruction by a Learning Acceleration Specialist using the PETS framework, which is the primary elementary thinking skills. And both those examples that I gave to you were taken from the PETS framework. Requirements: a reading instructional level D by the second interval, which is in March of 2023, from the Fontes and Pinnell instructional level expectations for reading, otherwise known as the benchmarks. Also exceeds expectations onto Intermath growth measure assessment. Kindergarten instruction will commence at the beginning of the third trimester. Entrance criteria for first grade. First grade students will receive whole class instruction by the Learning Acceleration Specialist for the first 20 minutes of the session. First grade students may be selected to receive the last 10 minutes of small group enrichment instruction by a Learning Acceleration Specialist using the PETS framework. Requirements: instructional level G by the first interval, which is November, December, from the Fontes and Pinnell instructional level expectations for reading, and the Into Math growth measure score of 181 or higher. Both of these scores exceed expectations. First grade instruction will commence at the beginning of the second trimester. Entrance criteria for second grade. Second grade students may be selected for participation in one or more of the small group enrichment instruction provided by a Learning Acceleration Specialist for the following units. For the first marking period, it's mathematics. Into Math growth measure score of 281 or higher, and earn an E in mathematics on their final first grade report card. If there are no students in the grade who qualify, then the top 5% of the class, based on these entrance criteria, will be invited into the program. And we do that specifically because the Strengthening Gifted and Talented Education Act wants us to compare to their chronological peers in the school district. And so we want to make sure that our school system represents an appropriate amount of gifted and talented students. For the second marking period, reading and literacy, instructional level L by the first interval, which is November, December, from the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessments, and earn an E in reading, writing, and word study on their most recent report card. Again, if there are no students in the grade who qualify, then the top 5% of the class, based on these entrance criteria, will be invited into the program. For third marking period, the science enrichment, teacher recommendation, and an E in science on their first and second trimester report cards. Entrance criteria for third grade. Third grade students may be selected for participation in one or more of the G&T programs provided by a learning acceleration specialist for the following units if either they receive a score of 95% on the LSAT 8, which is our universal screener, which I will discuss in a few slides, or for the math enrichment requirements, the Into Growth measure score of 381 or higher, and earn an E in mathematics on their most recent report card. If there are no students in the grade who qualify, then the top 5% of the class, based on these entrance criteria, will be invited into the program. For the second marking period for reading and literacy, instructional level O for the first interval, which is November through December, from the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessments, and earn an E in reading, writing, and word study on their most recent report card. If no students in the grade qualify, then the top 5% of the class, based on these entrance criteria, will be invited into the program. For the third trimester, science enrichment, teacher recommendation, and an E in science on their first and second trimester report card. The entrance criteria for fourth grade. Fourth grade students may be selected for participation in one or more of the G&T programs provided by a learning acceleration specialist for the following units if either they receive a score of 95% on the LSAT 8, or for the first marking period in mathematics, the Into Math growth measure score of 481 or higher, and earn an E in mathematics during each previous year's trimester. If there are no students in the grade who qualify, then the top 5% of the class, based on these entrance criteria, will be invited into the program. For the second marking period for reading and literacy, instructional level R from the first interval, which is November, December, of the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessments, and earn an E in reading, writing, and word study on their most recent report card. If there are no students in the grade who qualify, then the top 5% of the class, based on these entrance criteria, will be invited into the program. And for the third trimester, science, teacher recommendation, and an E in science during the first and second trimesters. Entrance criteria for fifth grade. Fifth grade students who participated in the Gifted and Talented program for fourth grade will be invited to participate in their respective fifth grade G&T programs. And we kept this because last year, when our fourth grade students who qualified for G&T, they were told that they would automatically go into fifth grade. And so we honored that for this year. Requirements for all other students for the first marking period in mathematics, Into Math growth measure score of 581 or higher, and earn an E in mathematics during each previous year's trimester. For the second marking period in reading, instructional level U from the first interval, which is November through December, of the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessments, and earn an E in reading, writing, and word study on their most recent report card. And the third marking period for science, teacher recommendation, and an E in science during the first and second trimester report cards. So the OLSAT 8, what is it and why use it? The Otis Lennon School Abilities Test, otherwise known as OLSAT, is a universal screening tool to help identify additional students in our gifted and talented program. It also provides information about all of our students' relative strengths and weaknesses. This year, it will be given to all of our 3rd and 4th graders. It provides all students the opportunity to participate in the G&T identification process. It minimizes the disproportionality in our G&T identification, and it provides a second pathway to our gifted and talented identification. It is a multiple choice aptitude test given by a teacher, and in our case, it's going to be the Learning Acceleration Specialist and classroom teacher in the classroom as a group. It is nationally standardized and norm referenced. The OLSAT 8 is designed to assess verbal comprehension, verbal reasoning, pictorial reasoning, figural reasoning, and quantitative reasoning. Who is being assessed? All 3rd and 4th grade students will have the opportunity to take the OLSAT 8. Exempt students are students of families who request non-participation, students who have previously taken the OLSAT in 2nd grade, students who have been pre-exposed. So the OLSAT 8, we are using the online versions of 2 levels. Level D is for our 3rd grade. Level E is our 4th grade. The test is about 75 minutes in length. It is proctor navigated. It consists of verbal and nonverbal sections. In the verbal section, it consists of verbal comprehension and verbal reasoning. That deals with the relationships between words, building sentences, understanding different definitions based on context. In the nonverbal sections, the pictorial reasoning, figural reasoning, and quantitative reasoning. So it asks questions about reasoning using images and illustrations, finding similarities and differences, and comprehending and continuing progressions. An example of an OLSAT 8 question. This is an example of a verbal comprehension, sentence completion. Amanda finally found a blank to the problem that would make everyone happy. Possible answers are A, cause, B, drawback, C, reward, D, solution, or E, source. So the correct answer is solution, because by reading through the sentence, it is clear that Amanda was able to find something that would help solve the problem, and the word solution means a way of solving the problem. Another example, this is a picture analogy. And so in the first row, there is a picture of an apple and a picture of a tree. The second row is a picture of an egg and a blank for them to fill in. And so the idea is that whatever goes on top, the bottom row has to follow. So in the top row, apples come from trees, so eggs come from chickens. And so the correct answer here would be chickens. The scoring of the OLSAT. The OLSAT provides us with 3 separate scores. The first score is a raw score, which is simply the number of questions answered correctly. Teachers can gain a lot of information about all of our students with this score because it's broken up between verbal and nonverbal, and so the teachers will know the number of verbal questions and nonverbal questions that the student has gotten right. The School Abilities Index score, the SAI score, it is taken, the raw scores is compared against the scores of other children in the same age group in the national sample and converted to a School Ability Index score, referred to as an SAI. The average SAI score is 100, and the maximum score is 150. The SAI score is then converted to a percentile score, which is what we use, which simply tells you how a student performed relative to other students in the national sample in their age group. For example, a percentile score of 95% would indicate that the student performed better than 95% of students in their age who took the LSAT. So program summary, all G&T sessions will be taught by learning acceleration specialists. The 5th grade is to be taught by the MTSS coaches for this year. MTSS coaches will assist the learning acceleration specialists in modifying the current LEAP/G&T curriculum to meet the needs of the students. Learning acceleration specialists will teach specific grade level LEAP G&T sessions based on their coaching assignments in literacy, math, and science. So what's next? So what's next is that we will send a letter home to all 3rd and 4th grade students, informing them of the upcoming LSAT 8. I think we already did that, actually. Send letters home to families of K through 5 students who qualify for our LEAP Gifted and Talented programs. Schedule monthly meetings with learning acceleration specialists, and schedule periodic meetings with students, families, and other stakeholders. Are there any questions?
Thank you for this presentation. The curriculum committee discussed this pretty extensively with Dr. Principato already, but I just wanted to clarify, make sure that I got a few things right. So the things that are different or new for this year is that the LSAT 8 is being given to all students as a qualifier, or is it one of
It's
them?
an additional path. Right,
Okay.
so it's another way for students to qualify.
And the specific criteria, the scores and things have changed slightly to accommodate, to make sure that we are in compliance with the new G&T law, correct?
Right, that they are exceeding expectations, yes.
Okay. And then my other question was just about that you had mentioned that for this year, 4th graders who participated in the program last year are going into it in 5th grade. If there is a chance that that might change, will there be, or can there be communication to families as soon as that change?
So I think that before anything changes, I believe that we really have to have a lot of committee meetings. As I said in the opening, districts tell me this is a 2 to 3 year process. You know, we need to examine our LEAP, our Gifted and Talented program. We need to look for other ways to assess giftedness, other paths of giftedness, not just high achievement. And so there are a lot of things to consider in our discussions. So I don't think anything would change until we've had, committee meetings and we've processed through the information.
That makes sense. Does anyone else have any questions for Dr. Principato?
I had, just for clarification also, it seems in the presentation, it seems very assessment heavy. So other than the LSAT, which you said is a 75-minute test, my assumption is that the other testing, the Fontes and Pinnell testing for reading, and the Into Math assessments are embedded as part of the regular curriculum assessment?
Yes, yes. So the Into Math is similar to our Imagine Math assessments. And yes, and benchmarks we've always done as well.
And then a secondary question, can this LSAT information be used to inform instruction for other students, like students in the general ed and students in need of academic support?
Yes, because it has the raw score that distinguishes verbal and nonverbal skills, and it gives the number of questions that each student had correct. And so that gives a tremendous amount of insight to teachers once they understand how to interpret that data, which is our responsibility to make sure they do. Yes.
Are the assessments given in, like, we have a lot of English language learners in other languages, like, or are they just primary English?
So depending on their other accommodations in other areas, ESL students can receive this test in other languages if it's part of their accommodations for other tests.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, we did discuss this a good bit in curriculum, and I figure some of these answers might be helpful for other folks too, because I think you were able to clarify a lot of questions that I had. So the current 5th grade entrance requirements basically allow students who qualified in 4th grade to continue in 5th grade, but to be clear, 5th grade students who meet the 5th grade requirements who didn't qualify in 4th grade will still be included in the gifted and talented program.
Right, and that's what all other students would follow the other guidelines.
Okay. So yeah, so students don't have to have been in the 4th grade program to also be in the 5th grade program?
No, no.
Okay.
As long as they meet the other requirements as outlined for the INSU math and the other G&T guidelines.
And to confirm, students can be part or potentially selected for one, but not all of the programs, right? So they could be identified as, part of the gifted and talented program for, let's say, math, but not for science or not for English.
Yes.
And then for the OLSAT 8, are the results of that test, is that test used elsewhere or for other purposes for the schools, or just for identification for G&T?
Well, so right now we're using it for further identification for G&T, with the side effect that it does also provide a lot of information about a student's strengths and weaknesses in areas of logic and reasoning.
And I think I heard you mention that then those results will be used presumably by the school's data team to try to identify, I guess, curricular supports for students to try to boost those scores?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Yeah, I mean, so my understanding is the OLSAT 8 seems to be more of a generalized attempt at I guess, IQ test, basically.
It's not an IQ test, but it is a universal screener meant to grab the students that we traditionally do not grab and identify as gifted.
Okay, so my question there is it does provide a lot of additional information, but how would that, about a student's, assessment about some facet of a student's ability, but how will that information be used, will it be used to tailor the education of students who aren't identified as gifted and talented?
Absolutely. I think that it would possibly go through the data team along with the access tests and all the other test results that we have.
And then you mentioned that there are periodic meetings with students, families, and other stakeholders. Can you talk about what those meetings would go over and then what the purpose of those meetings are?
Right. So the Learning Acceleration Specialist will be meeting each month. We want to talk about, what's working now. We want to go back and review our entrance criteria. We want to go back and review our curriculum, making sure it's aligned. So there are a lot of areas that we still need to, as we go through things, that we assess and reflect on what we're doing to make the program stronger. We also want to talk about other ways of identifying students other than high achievement test scores, making sure that there are parent input, student input, the idea of, student portfolios, other ways of expressing, their giftedness, and that, hopefully that we'll be able to widen our scope of gifted and talented programs to include giftedness, let's say, for example, in leadership, or, in the visual arts, or in the performing arts. So there's a lot of conversation that really should be happening around gifted and talented.
And my I guess, understanding of this program, the first time I had seen this presentation was that it's basically an extension of the differentiation that is happening already for all students, right? And it's just differentiation kind of at the idea at the top, maybe academic level.
The difference is that we are making sure that these kids are receiving instruction above their grade level curriculum. So yes, it is still differentiation, but we are focusing on above the general grade level curriculum.
And I think one other question I had was for families who believe that their students should be in a particular gifted and talented program, but are not selected to be in that program, is there an appeals process? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so the only thing that we changed this year was the entrance criteria. So the process is still the same. So initially, the parents should reach out at the building level with the building principal to review the current data. And then after that, if the parent feels like he or she has additional evidence to support the idea that the child, could qualify for giftedness, then we need to take it to another level and possibly then consider, taking whatever the evidence is and returning it to the MTSS committee to really take a deep dive into that individual case.
And then finally, I just have one comment, which is that I did bring up in committee, which is that I think that understanding that there are resource limitations, right, which is one of the reasons why perhaps we don't provide all services to all kids, just the kids that we deem as needing these services. I would be in support of finding ways in which we can provide these gifted and talented enrichment activities to all students and all families who are interested, right? Looking at the selection criteria where it says, hey, if we don't have students who meet these criteria, we'll take the top 5% of the class and provide these enrichment activities to these students. I'd be in favor of being able to expand that to 10% or 15% or 20% if possible, because in my experience as a teacher and my own personal experience as a learner, I think there are many times in which, given the materials, students and people who maybe didn't believe that they could learn, right, or haven't been described as having been able to learn something, are actually able to engage in the materials and push themselves further than they ever have before, given that opportunity, right? And so, understand that resources are one of the big things that we have to manage and discuss here as a Board of Education. I am in favor of trying to expand access to these gifted and talented programs to as many students as possible. And
Yes, but please also keep in mind that that is the role of the Learning Acceleration Specialist, that the Learning Acceleration Specialist accelerates the learning of all students. So that should happen naturally.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So I'm understanding that we're discussing other entryways into the programs. I think that it's important to, I guess, speed that up as much as possible, because there's so many kids that they're not going to get an E in class because they have learning differences. They might be frustrated. They might be bored. Like, not having the challenging materials that actually is causing them to not be doing well in class, that prevents them from getting into the program to begin with.
Yes.
So I think that that's important, but I think it's also having kids that have gone through like the LEAP program, which is great, but it's the very act of like being a more participatory education path, right? It's that it's more hands-on that I think is really appealing to the kids, and having even just like the standard track classroom curriculums be more engaging and more hands-on.
Right.
Is a key component to all of it.
Right, so I wanted to speak to your first point. So for those students who generally have difficulty taking tests and the traditional ways of gaining entry into such a program, that we really should look at that on a case-by-case basis, starting at the school level with the building principal and then possibly the MTSS committee, and that is an opportunity for parents to discuss whatever additional evidence or things that we may not know about the child that that parent does know. And so I think that should be on an individualized level at the building level.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Principato.
You're welcome.
So we owe our student reps an apology for having, normally there aren't this many presentations, so that was part of it too. But before we move into committee of the whole to discuss just some updates that are happening right now for not changes to the budget process, but just what's going on with the budget process right now, plus Ms. McPartland is going to talk to us about just a better understanding of what the learning acceleration specialists are doing in the elementary schools. But before that happens, we'd like to move to section 9 to give our student reps the chance to give their reports, and if they need to get out of here, they are, we understand that, and it's been a long meeting already, so go ahead.
Thank you. So we just want to begin our student report by establishing that we are looking to truly and honestly represent the student body and address issues that are posing major obstacles for all students.
So we're going to start by sharing what events and activities have been taking place in the high school. So CHS's biannual blood drive was held on October 13th, and it was sponsored by the Interact Club and was successful. The counseling department's college roll call began today, acknowledging students who have already received college acceptances. And on the same wavelength, payments for the senior trip are being collected, and the student deposits were due last week.
Homecoming is on Tuesday, November 8th this year, and tickets will be on sale starting November 1st. The fall play Murder in the Garden will take place on November 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And this play was actually written by seniors, Abby Eimer, Audrey Bosniak, and Ben Savarino-Dupras. So it's an entirely student-driven process, and they're also directing it. There's no charge for admission, but donations will be collected if you feel so moved. Many Collingswood sports teams have had their senior nights in the past 2 weeks, so they were honoring the graduating players on their teams. Most notably, our field hockey team is 13-3 this season, and our girls tennis team just finished their season last week. And additionally, as we saw earlier in the meeting, we welcomed our German exchange students from the Jülich Collingswood Exchange on October 10th, and they'll be leaving us on Friday.
And then we wanted to end the student report by bringing up a huge obstacle students have been confronted with this school year. This isn't just a high school issue, because I've heard from teachers who have students attending elementary schools in our district is also a problem. Students have been struggling to find accessible bathrooms during the school day, and it's often the case that there is one singular bathroom available for use at a time, and as a result, instructional time is being used to find and open the bathroom.
To emphasize the gravity of the situation, I left my 6th period class today at 12:26 and did not return until 12:38. So it took me 12 minutes, which is over a quarter of my class time, to find and use a bathroom that was actually open.
And while we understand that there are disciplinary issues behind this, for some of the reasons for the bathrooms being closed at times, the solution cannot be making bathrooms completely inaccessible to all students. So we believe it is important that the Board of Education works with student officials throughout the district to solve this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for both the report, and we appreciate the feedback at the end too, because as we've been telling you, and we're glad you guys are taking us up on it, we'd like to hear from students about all of the various issues. So this is something that we will bring to Buildings and Grounds and Dr. McDowell and talk more about, and hopefully a resolution can come from it. So thank you for that.
Sorry, I just do want to add one thing. It's not that the bathrooms aren't operational, it's that they're locked. And if a teacher's on bathroom duty and that teacher isn't there that day, there is no sub. So that bathroom is just completely inaccessible at that point.
So are multiple bathrooms open if there's teachers there to?
It is usually it's one set of bathrooms. So it's usually a girls' room and a boys' room on the 2nd floor. And we have, our library has bathrooms, but we are not allowed to use them.
Okay.
And then there are bathrooms on every floor that are just locked and we're not allowed to use them.
So regardless of where your class is, you have to go to the 2nd floor?
Yes.
Okay. Did you want to ask?
Well, I just wanted to thank them for going beyond just like student activity updates and taking the initiative for that. And then the other thing is I love when students stay, but I also understand that like academics and other responsibilities are important. And every single meeting for like the last 6 years, we move item 9 up to the beginning. Can we just permanently move it to like number 1?
It's been nice for them to hear the presentations, or for committee of the whole to participate in committee of the whole, but maybe we'll put it like directly after committee of the whole.
No, and I would love for them to stay, they always
Right,
add.
but you know, it's already 8:30.
It's 8:30 and,
Yeah.
right, and we have. Right, yeah.
If you'd like to stay for committee of the whole now, you are more than welcome, but we totally understand. Do you have more to say? All right, cool. Great. All right, so, sorry, give me a second here. Motion to, we're going to go back to section 4 now. Motion to enter committee of the whole.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Ms. McPartland, would you come join us up here in one of the chairs so that you're not standing off to the side? So we have 2 topics for committee of the whole tonight. The first, although maybe, should I do it the other way around? Okay. You're good to go? Okay. Is we realized, you know, with the gifted and talented presentation, we mention a lot of times these MTSS coaches and learning acceleration specialists, and we hear these words all the time, and even I sometimes struggle to fully explain what it is that they're doing, because they're new roles this year. So we thought a discussion of what that looks like in the elementary schools would be beneficial, not just for us, but for everyone else in the audience or listening at home. So if you could, I'm going to hand the mic over to you and talk a little bit about what those roles look like at the elementary school.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So thank you, everyone. I want to first start off by saying that the role of Learning Acceleration Specialist was previously held by a title of Academic Intervention Team, but as the state moved toward a model of learning acceleration, it felt important to keep those roles and the language around them consistent. So that is a change of title, essentially, for this year with the same kind of focus. So we are very fortunate in our district that for a long time we've had the opportunity to have teachers in our classroom working side by side the classroom teachers. Those teachers, learning acceleration specialists, will push into classrooms twice a day for literacy and mathematics. Their goal is really to support instruction in Tier 1, particularly in the classroom, in Tier 2, and also in Tier 3 interventions. Within the classroom environment, for math, you will notice flexible grouping. This year, in particular, we have the new Into Math program, which has a lot of additional resources which will help teachers and the learning acceleration specialists tailor the instruction to meet individual student needs. That is kind of the focus for mathematics. In the area of literacy instruction, particular to the first trimester this year at elementary, we have been providing flexible grouping for guided reading instruction. Our focus for the first trimester was this because we wanted to make sure that as students were moving toward a kind of more typical school year, that we were grouping students accordingly and really meeting their needs, ensuring that they have success in their guided reading groups before we make any determinations for stronger intervention, perhaps in Tier 2 and Tier 3. One of the things I would like to highlight is what Windsor had mentioned earlier, which is we have formed data teams this year. They consist of Windsor, they consist of our supervisors, myself, and what we are doing is actually having some very specific conversations surrounding the data that we are receiving from our programs and our assessments that we are using regularly. One of the highlights of this is really getting practical with the data. We have historically across the district had a number of tools that we've used. Some have been more successful than others. We really feel like at this point we're in a really great point, having tools that we think are going to be not only accessible to teachers and administrators, but also just useful for classroom instruction. So that is the role of Learning Acceleration Specialist. Obviously, they will also be working with our gifted and talented students and supporting their specific plans and needs. And occasionally, they will also work with Tier 3 students who might need a more intensive intervention in a 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 ratio.
Can I interrupt you for
You can.
So just for kind of clarification, I think that was really helpful for me to kind of picture. So the learning acceleration specialists it's a different way of saying academic support.
Correct.
And often when we hear learning acceleration, because of the word acceleration, it sounds like it's just a speed, like we're trying to scrunch all of this information faster, and that's kind of an inaccurate description of that, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
So these teachers are helping to support the classroom teachers in getting all of the students to where they need to be. Would that be right?
Yes, that is correct. Some of the information they may have received from the assessment results are students may be on a specific level, but there might be a skill deficit in some particular area that students can receive additional instruction without necessarily moving them in a level or moving them to another group, but just providing that skill instruction to determine where their needs might be individually. So that's one of the highlights of the offerings in that program. So the MTSS instructional coach, that is a new role in our district. Formerly, we used to have a literacy coach who serviced all 5 elementary schools, Mrs. Christy Graham, and she has done a pretty incredible job over the last few years supporting our literacy work under the Balanced Literacy Framework, but obviously, 5 schools, that's a lot. We chose this role this year for multiple reasons, and I just want to say that one of them was to support our literacy initiative, because as a literacy teacher across the district, balanced literacy encompasses quite a few areas. So not only is it just reading and writing instruction, it's also anything that has to do with word study instruction, phonics, phonemic awareness, essentially all of the skills that help you to be a proficient and confident reader, and then also in writing. Our coaches this year, because it is a new role, are really starting to dip their toes in the water for multiple reasons. One is they are definitely coordinating with the learning acceleration specialists. They are working as a team within their buildings to support student learning. They are also going to be focusing really on strengthening the instruction in the classroom across the board, because that targets our Tier 1 intervention. So the stronger our teaching in our classrooms, the less students will have in Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions, and the more apt we will be to be able to meet student needs. So I will say that this has been a highlight for our buildings, because now we have a larger team effort to support student and teacher needs. They are also collaborating with any school's teams in terms of individualized plans, whether it be for gifted and talented, INRS action plans, other supportive needs of the building. And they are also serving on our school's data team. So as we met this morning with first of our 2 schools, the coaches were present to hear the data, and they will be working alongside the building principal to support the plans that are being developed and the needs of each individual school. So that's another highlight. One of the things that I guess I also want to mention in terms of being an instructional coach is this is a very new role, and so we are spending a lot of time in professional learning, understanding how to work with adults, because they have mostly been interventionists up to this time, and so that's a huge shift. We are focusing heavily on the work of Elena Aguilar to support our teachers, and I meet with them weekly, and we are working through not only content area coaching, but also just philosophically, how do we work with our adult learners, and how do we make sure that that's impactful to our students.
And is there one MTSS coach at each elementary school, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And at least one learning acceleration specialist as well, or is...
Yes, there are at least, actually, every building has 2. Some buildings have 3, depending on the number of students.
Size, right, okay. Does anyone else have any other questions or want to talk more about these new roles or changed roles at the elementary level?
Yeah, I did have a question about the data teams, and if you could give some examples of, like, what are some of the adjustments or, I guess adjustments that are coming out of these meetings for teachers?
Sure. So today was our first one, so I'm going to say that we were pretty successful, we feel like. There's always room for improvement. But for the first 2 elementary schools, we looked at the data for Into Math. We looked at the data for their first round of instructional level reading records for each grade. We looked at Start Strong data, and we looked at NGSLA data. One of the things that we were able to do was to identify specific areas of focus, so for NJSLA, and Start Strong, specific learning standards, and how could we support the students across grade levels in order to ensure we are meeting the targets for those standards and enhancing our instruction. We are also ensuring that in terms of the focus data for Fontys and Pinnell, we know that the reading level is an important aspect of determining whether there's been growth, but there are aspects to the reading record and the benchmark assessment in terms of reading for their comprehension and their fluency, their decoding, so that we can assure that if we are moving students through next phases of their learning, we are, again, targeting any skills before they are confident to move on. In math, we were actually able to look at some of the new reports that we have and really kind of drill down into which ones in this first year would be important for students and for teachers and the principals to really target so that we can guide our instruction. We don't want to overwhelm. There are many reports offered, but we want to make sure that what we're doing in year one is meaningful. Ultimately, these conversations regarding standards, regarding assessments, all sorts of assessments, that is, will be most important in PLC discussions where grade level team members can meet together. So if I'm a third grade teacher and I'm noticing that my students scored historically really well on a particular standard in math or ELA, we can talk about what the instruction might have been like, what was done in the classroom that might have been different from other colleagues, and that will serve to enhance our curriculum over time.
So that was actually a question I had written down from I figured you'd be able to answer during Windsor's presentation on the NJSLA score. So the grade band breakdowns, that's where that work happens, right, in this PLCs, that if, one school, when we were talking about the different elementary schools, if two schools have great, success in certain areas, they can talk about how they've been delivering that information. And okay,
That's definitely the ultimate goal. Great.
Clinton, you have your mic on, but not for
It's just
a particular reason? Okay, cool. Just checking. Did anyone else want to mention or talk at all about any of this? Did you want to use this time to say anything about the NJSLA scoring info?
Yes. So I think that just to provide some clarity, the district test report is part of a CUSAC compliance activity. So it's very high level. It is not the level of a sophisticated data inquiry and analysis that is required. We hold tighter to the work of the data teams, and specifically, we've developed a continuous improvement guide which digs deeper by grade band, both at elementary and at secondary. So there's actually two guides, because the questions and the data processes that are required are totally different. So that then mirrors and supports the PLC process that also helps to support, or the data teams help to support that inquiry process. And then we have our monthly school-based continuous improvement guide meetings where schools are not just analyzing the data, but they're presenting what they're doing in response to the data. We also monthly have grade band meetings where we're calibrating among the different schools. So one of the questions that was asked was school-by-school comparisons. So as grade bands, we're also meeting. So all of the elementary schools meet, and then all of the secondary schools meet. We do further data review, instructional planning, and then ultimately calibration, and then we go in and actually do classroom observations to see if it's actually taking place. And then we calibrate on the feedback, and then that's given back to the school for further implementation. So it's a continuous cycle, and we're scaling up. Last year was our first introduction into how do we significantly increase our data literacy. This year, we're going a bit deeper, but we're also paired with that, we're in year one of a new curriculum adoption. So our math curriculum, it generally takes 3 years to fully adopt a curriculum. So we're doing a lot, but what I wanted to do was just to give the appropriate context as it related with the district testing report. The district testing report, it's very high level. It's not intimately connected to the day-to-day work that our educators are doing.
I appreciate that clarity and context. I think for us to adequately hold the district accountable to the data results that you're striving for, we need to be brought into more of the conversations and see more of the data. Like that high of a level can't be the only data we're seeing all year.
We noted that. We'll make a significant adjustment, and we will provide more data in increments so that we can get deeper and it's not so overwhelming.
All right, so unless someone else wanted to, you can just sit here. Were you leaning forward? Okay, then I was going to suggest that we talk about the budget. So we just wanted to, we thought we would make sorry, it's getting late here. we would make a regular part, that's what I'm trying to say, of Committee of the Whole, just an update to where we are in the budget process each month as we're going along. And I know that a lot of things have begun, and so Dr. McDowell, if you could fill us in on what those steps are.
So please bear with me. I realize this has been a lot of information, but context matters. But I also don't want to miss the moment. We forgot to publicly thank and mention the collective efforts of our PTAs. This past weekend, all of our PTAs, they led a phenomenal fall festival in partnership with the Knight Park trustees. So we just wanted to acknowledge their collective efforts. They raised a lot of funds. A lot of students and their families and residents and community members were able to come together in a very positive way. And we just wanted to publicly acknowledge that. Also wanted to, and you'll see the tie-in after this, also wanted to unfortunately reference the challenge associated with school safety. There was another school shooting this morning in St. Louis, Missouri, at a performing arts high school. There was mass casualties, loss of life, and multiple injuries. And our hearts go out to those communities that are being affected with violence in our schools. And this will be one of the through lines with ongoing partnership and discussion between our Board of Education, our school and district administration, as well as leadership within the borough about what are ways that we can all work together in order to be able to address these challenges. One of the challenges I want to make sure that is in the public sphere is the continued practice of hoaxes and swatting that has not just affected school districts all across New Jersey, but it's happening all across the country. Swatting is the concept where it's the new bomb threat. We have individuals that are calling in threats for the sole purpose of pranking and terrorizing the local communities. There were two districts that were swatted this morning. We are currently participating in the New Jersey School Board's workshop, which is professional development for all school districts down in Atlantic City. And this was one of the topics of discussion as it related to crisis and crisis communication. And what do you do when individuals are already anxious and tension is at an all-time high? So we just wanted to acknowledge that. We also wanted to strongly encourage our community and our families. Please have conversations with your families, with your children about the importance of taking safety drills seriously, the importance of if you see something, say something, and that we all have a responsibility to keep each other safe. When it comes to budget development is it's a community-wide endeavor. So we are not just using our community meetings as an opportunity to present about the strategic plan. We're also using it as an opportunity to collect data and information. We have had 5 of the 6 scheduled roadshow meetings. The next meeting is tomorrow evening at the middle school auditorium at 6 o'clock. Please join us. This will be a brief presentation about our strategic plan, which will ultimately be a large area of prioritization in the budget development. But the most meaningful piece is that there's targeted Q&A, which is the bulk of the meeting. We also want to make sure that we're providing clarity within our community about the differences between community engagement and public information. The board meeting is not a public meeting. The board meeting is a business meeting that happens in public. So one of the things that we want to strongly encourage is that when opportunities are presented for us to engage in authentic conversations, please join us. No topic is off the table, but that's really where voices can be heard in those community meetings, whether they be in person or in virtual, so we encourage you to participate. There will be a series over the next 60 to 90 days of smaller, more intimate meetings that are hosted by our community members and residents throughout Collingswood. Those will be really great opportunities in a much smaller setting to be able to talk, for the sake of Thanksgiving, turkey, and get really deep into conversations with the goal of listening and hearing from the community what are the needs, which will ultimately help to inform what a cohesive proposal will look like that will then be presented back to the community sometime early of 2023. One of the really important pieces of this engagement work has been the student voice meetings. So we have two of our student leaders here, but we've also had the opportunity to speak with almost 36 of our student leaders, which represents some of the different student groups, including Student Council, the Capelli Crew, the Social Justice Club, Pause TV, and senior leadership. And we are slated to have significantly more opportunities to hear directly from our students and our student leaders across all aspects of school and district life. So in terms of the budget development process, all of our administrators have been given initial guidance, both technical in terms of how you actually submit a budget, and then the adaptive piece, which is what are the processes needed in order to make decisions and to establish priorities. So there are 3 core district priorities which we have shared with schools, which they will be sharing with their school communities. Priority number 1 is to support learning acceleration in year 2. This is achieved through the continued investments and implementation of professional learning communities, for us to continue to refine professional learning, for us to integrate our school support model in the areas of social and emotional learning, mental health, and comprehensive student support, and then ultimately for us to begin building capacity for more inclusive classrooms, which in its most basic term is how do we make sure that we shift more students into the least restrictive environment. Priority number 2 is infrastructure expansion. How do we address some of our space needs? How do we look at our facilities in the long term, and how do we make sure that we're involving our community in those decision-making processes? How do we significantly improve technology services through the defining of roles and responsibilities? How do we support workflow and investments in cybersecurity and infrastructure? Communication, how do we significantly improve communication with the development of a comprehensive plan? And then ultimately, how do we address safety and security in an aging infrastructure? And then finally, priority 3 is Vision 2026 implementation year 1. This is how do we integrate the competencies of our new or updated portrait of a graduate? How do we increase opportunities for student voice by providing more opportunities for students to lead and take greater ownership in their learning? How do we focus on academic proficiency? How do we significantly increase the capabilities of our educators to be more data literate and for us to make better informed decisions which ultimately lead to better student outcomes? And then ultimately, how do we improve and align all of our college and career programs so that we increase post-secondary success among our students? And then how are we supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion by creating more opportunities for our schools to collaborate? How do we increase cultural competence among faculty and staff? And then how do we actively recruit a more diverse workforce? So what does training look like for our administrators or the individuals responsible for submitting budget requests? All administrators, whether they be school-based or district-based, first have to identify their priorities. Second, they have to inform their school community of said priorities. In addition to being transparent, they are also expected to intimately involve their school communities, which consist of all faculty and staff for each building, as well as students when and where appropriate, as well as parents and community partners in those discussions. Ultimately, principals will make the final decision in terms of what moves forward with their recommendations or their requests, but these are not to be done without significant input from faculty and staff, from students and families. Review of student data. We are shifting from doing what we've always done to going to where the needs are aligned with what the data is telling us, with an emphasis on making sure that all the students' needs are taken care of, and hopefully a lot of the wants, but making sure that we are extremely clear about what constitutes a need versus what constitutes a want. Building of the learning schedule, so all schools will be engaged in intensive conversations with each of their school communities about what's the mechanism to be able to provide educational services. What does that schedule look like? With an emphasis on what is the actual experience that a student travels during the day, and how are we making sure that that is aligned with what students believe is in their best interest, aligned with ultimately their programmatic interests as well. Students will be, in the very near future, will be surveyed for the purpose of identifying which courses will or will not be offered in September of 2023. We are making sure that if student voice, which student voice is one of 7 strategic areas of our strategic plan, if student voice is to be elevated, is to be respected, then students should have a strong amount of say in their daily school life. So we are making sure that there's a through line in what we offer, when we offer it, and how we offer it. So what that means is that there will be an annual review of the program of study each and every year, no different than what you would see on a college campus. For example, there are some courses that are offered every year in college. There are some courses that are offered every other semester. There are some courses that are offered every other year. It doesn't mean that they've abandoned the courses. It just means that at that particular moment in time or for that semester, students have not indicated they were either interested in taking it or room was in their schedule for them to sign up for it. We're also asking for schools to align their staffing based on student needs. So we're not creating a situation that doesn't value staff. What we're asking schools to do is to identify the student needs and then make sure that we're aligning the responsibilities of our staff to said needs, with an emphasis on making sure that we're able to keep our people. In this environment, we want to make sure that our staff are also protected, but not at the sacrifice of meeting the needs of our students. We're also asking schools to consider their pain points. What did not work this year? What has not worked for many years? And how are you addressing that in your budget requests? And then ultimately, when we talk about maximizing return on investment, we're not asking for schools to be sterile in their approach. We're asking for schools to prioritize a few things. One, making sure that you're allocating resources to what works best for your students, and attempt to eliminate expenditures that do not support your strategies. We're asking for them to focus on needs, not entitlements, which means working collaboratively with faculty and staff to be able to better differentiate needs versus wants, and ensuring that student need drives the decision-making process. Ultimately, we want to make sure, bless you, we want to make sure that student interests are at the heart of all of our conversations, because we want students to be actively engaged, but we also need for them to understand that their voice really matters. And then ultimately, we are going to look at over-enrolled courses as well as under-enrolled courses, because in our district, we cannot say that it is acceptable for the average kindergarten class to be 25 or 26, and for some other classes to be 5 or 6. So we want to make sure that we are allocating resources in the areas of greatest need, and that requires for schools who are better positioned to make a lot of those decisions to really have those really tough conversations prior to it coming to the district leadership team. We're also asking for schools to take a different look at discretionary spending, and with the involvement of your faculty and staff, look at the way in which you're spending funding. So what does that mean in a very concrete way? So if you've got $100, instead of giving everybody $1, would it make more sense for the group to say, hey, we have $100, what's a more effective way to use these dollars? Schools are empowered and encouraged to make those types of decisions. There has to be heavy coordination between the different departments to make sure that we're not being redundant in our efforts, so that we're maximizing every possible dollar so that the benefit is transferred to our students. And then ultimately, we want schools to think outside the box. The statement that I'm using is that when in doubt, accelerate, and when there is no doubt, innovate. So we want our schools to work collaboratively with our faculty and staff, use student data as the lens in which they help to determine need, use student voice in order to reinforce interest, and then ultimately make sure that they're aligning the experiences to the DNA of their school. So we're not asking for schools to do major reconstructive surgery, we're asking for them to do fine-tuned surgical precision. So how does this manifest on a regular basis? So we have a monthly administrative meeting where we calibrate as a full district. We further review these concepts by grade band, also monthly, in addition to the targeted data and instructional piece. And then each school also has their one-on-one meetings with the smaller team where we're further providing additional support. So one of the things that we learned last year was that whenever change comes in, we need to take a more hands-on approach and then over a period of time lessen the level of support. So we'll be more intimately involved in making sure that no school falls between the cracks this year, and that making sure that we're holding all schools accountable for engaging their school community in these decisions.
So I wanted to thank you. That was a lot of information, so I just wanted to kind of back it up a little bit and do a little bit of a check for understanding. So the administration at each school has been given kind of the overarching district priorities that you started with, and they're being tasked with then coming into their own school community and looking at how their specific school community can address these various needs, along with whatever else they just might need for that year. Correct?
So there's two sides of that discussion. One is the technical aspect. So there is a system in which they are looking at budget line items, they're doing the math, they're doing the calculations in the system where they have to submit. So that training, those expectations are separate and apart from the adaptive piece, which is how do you actually get to a recommendation? Right. So that we have refined our guidance from last year. So all of the schools received a guidance documentation about how you have those conversations. They also have a template that every school will be presenting their budget request to the senior team probably sometime in January, which kind of walks them through. And then we're going to the schools and actually helping them get to that phase where they're actually able to present that. So schools that may or may not struggle with how to present this to their faculty, we will provide hands-on technical assistance in order to help them actually be able to do that.
So right now it's the end of October, so let's say for the month of November, what is happening is that admins are thinking about what needs they may have. They're surveying, if it's at the secondary level, they're surveying students to get more information about what the program of study could look like. At all levels, they're talking with not their administration. The administration is talking with the teachers and staff about what they're seeing in their classrooms, what needs are coming up. They're looking at data to see where they may need to add programs so that's kind of what's happening right now.
So it's in its infancy. So this month it marks the start of the budget season. Schools have between now and the end of December or prior to winter break to engage in those discussions. So in addition, we have a superintendent advisory council which is made up of faculty and staff. This Thursday, they will be given the same training that all of our administrators have been given. And then later that day, on Thursday, we have a parent advisory council, which is about 45 PTA and parent leaders who will also receive the same training. And effective October 28th, they will be knocking on the doors of schools in order to actively participate in those processes. So between October 28th and I believe December 19th, each school community will be engaged in targeted discussion about their priorities, about student needs, and then ultimately what's the request or the solution to be able to address those needs.
And then I was just writing down some things that, so for clarification about who's in some of these meetings, so when you say, like, let's say the elementary administrative team is meeting together, who are those people? Are those the principals? Is it more than just the principals? What does that mean?
So when we have a grade band meeting, it's all of the elementary principals and then all of the supervisors who support elementary education.
Gotcha. And so then when that happens in secondary, it's called?
It's all of the middle and the high school administrative team and then the district supervisors who support secondary education.
And so then individual school admin teams, like at the elementary level, what does that look like? Is it just the principal?
Generally, it's just the principal, and then, so every school is configured a little bit differently.
Right.
So the leadership team at the elementary also includes some faculty and staff.
Okay.
But there is an expectation that has been communicated to all schools that they are to involve their faculty and staff in the development of the budget.
Okay. Anybody else? I didn't want to be the only one talking. I was just trying to get some things.
I was going to ask, what are some of the challenges or areas of supports that school leaders have brought to you already about the budgeting process?
So when we think about zero-based budgeting or we think about equity-based budgeting, there are some pros and cons. So the pros are it greatly reduces overspending because considerable thought is placed into each request. Site-level participation is increased because there are additional stakeholders to make better informed decisions. Budget justification increases transparency and ultimately confidence that we're being mindful through the usage of public dollars. And then outdated allocation methods are discarded. So what that means is that traditionally when you have what's called rollover spending makes assumptions about what your needs are, which is not accurate. Oh, this is what we did last year, so we're just going to spend what we spent last year, but your needs are different this upcoming year. So it ends up creating gaps which then have to be reconciled throughout the year. Generally, it happens in the middle of the year where, oh, crap, we didn't allocate funding based on the actual needs. We either need to do a budget transfer or we need to cut a program that we funded last year but we may not need this year. And that can be very disruptive. Programmatic spending is also directly linked to student achievement and targeted strategies outlined by the school opposed to everybody has to do the same thing. What are some of the cons? It takes more time. It's more intensive because it requires for you to be very mindful of how are you using your resources and how are they aligned with your strategy to be able to meet student needs. Sometimes there is a lack of financial expertise at the school level, which is why our finance team and our leadership team will be working hand in hand with schools in order to fill some of those gaps. Sometimes schools may feel the need or the pressure to spend less. Equity-based budgeting is not about spending less, it's about spending smarter. So if you have $5 million to spend, we're not saying that you should spend less than $5 million. What we're saying is that don't come and ask for 10. We're saying that, so it really requires us to take an annual assessment of, based on the funding that we have available, what's the most effective way in which we can allocate those resources? And then ultimately, some of the cons is that sometimes requests can be denied because there's not an adequate justification other than our feelings. So yes, feelings are important, but feelings can't be the only rationale for why we're spending millions of dollars.
So what I'm hearing is some of the challenges and I think the supports that are being provided to the school leadership are around understanding how to what is proper justification for expenses, understanding also just the nitty-gritty of financial planning and budgeting at a more detailed level.
Yes, sir.
And then you mentioned that the students will be surveyed about classes that will or won't be offered in the coming year. Just wanted to check to make sure that the purpose and importance of that student survey is being communicated to the students and the families. I think that my understanding was that survey might have been given last year as well, but maybe students weren't aware that it was actually being used.
So they were surveyed last year, but one of the reflections that we made is that we were not explicit about the purpose of why we're collecting this information. And I know that the planning team this year has done a much better job of organizing what that's going to look like. They'll be releasing that very soon.
And then I had one kind of comment, which is that I do want to make note that I do appreciate how the decision-making leadership is being spread out, right, and how the school leaders are being empowered to meet the needs of their communities, of course with district support, and I think it makes a lot of sense with a district as ours. We have multiple schools serving multiple different communities, that the school leaders at those schools should have a major part to play in the planning of the services that they provide to our students. And so I do appreciate the work and effort that you're putting forth in distributing that leadership and supporting them in providing this guidance and providing this leadership in terms of the budgeting, in terms of what the schools do in the following years.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Can I have a motion to exit committee of the whole, please?
Can I jump in actually?
Sorry. What? I don't know if they wanted to raise anything or if they just wanted to hear. Oh. Okay. We'll make sure that, or we can even reach out to them and see what else they wanted to. Oh, all right. Okay. So they had some questions on the budget process, so we'll make sure that we reach out to the student reps before next meeting, and that any of their questions we can start with them instead of with us.
Reagan, would this be appropriate time for me to ask a follow-up about the Chromebook situation from middle school from last board meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to see if there was any updates about whether families who had expressed a need to have a Chromebook at home for the middle school have had that need met, and if any families had come forth saying that they could not afford the insurance plan, and if we had a plan forth to allow those families still to bring Chromebooks home.
So the quick answer, no. So our core responsibility is to make sure that we have, in a one-to-one computing environment, that we have a one-to-one computing environment during the school day. That need is being met. We have a cache of machines that are currently in the process of repair. We've had over 200 requests for a take-home device. That's about $90,000 worth of equipment. We're not there yet. So I know that the middle school administrative team is going to be working with the technology team to, over the coming weeks, to tier out how do they fill that need. In the interim, we are asking for the middle school to update its expectations around homework, so that students are not negatively impacted if they do not have access to a digital device at home.
And my understanding is that textbooks are all digital at the middle school?
So,
textbooks don't get sent home with students.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, at the middle school.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
But some of the books are like books, and then some are virtual.
Gotcha. But I guess at the middle school level, now it's sent home with them, so it's not a difference. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Motion to exit committee of the whole. And a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Now, thanks, Jen. Section 5, future dates and miscellaneous. Just wanted to point out there's some dates on there where schools are closed for the NJEA convention, and Thanksgiving break, as well as some various meetings and PTA events that you can look for. Section 6, motion to approve the minutes of the September 27th, 2022 regular board meeting. And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We move to section 7, which is our first opportunity for public comment. The purpose for this public comment section is to discuss items listed on the agenda. Additional, more general comments may be made later in the meeting. The public is reminded that attempts to resolve all concerns and complaints should first go through appropriate staff members and administrators. The intent of public comment is to give the community the opportunity to provide feedback to the board. We will be actively listening and taking notes so that we can take all that is being said into consideration. If appropriate, clarifying comments may be made at the end of the public comment section. For more detailed responses to concerns, communication may go out later in the week by the appropriate staff members or administrators, or be discussed by the board during future committee meetings. If you would like to make a comment, please come and stand and state your name and address, and keep your comments to 5 minutes or less.
Good evening, everyone. Jeff DeMasi, 1001 Park Avenue. First, I want to just thank the Phillies for closing out last night, so we didn't have to call out sick everyone today for... I can't even imagine trying to do this with the Phillies playing. So anyway, and then secondly, I just wanted to say before I kind of talked about the reason I came to the comments I want to make, I want to thank the board for all the things you cover. Sitting through last month's board meeting and this month's, kind of blown away by the topics: safety, the laptop, Chromebook issues, personnel issues. It's just so much, and I really can't even imagine how you guys managed to do it all, to be honest. I wanted to, and also thank Dr. Principato for the presentation on LEAP. I think that was, very helpful to get a lot more information that we were seeking, last month and in the past. I do have some concerns that I do want to share about what was presented tonight. I think one of my main concerns is timeline. I'm not really sure what is the procedure. It doesn't seem like the changes to LEAP are on the agenda to get voted on tonight, but if they are, it's a little concerning to me that this would be happening now while the process has already started. As a professor, when we do curriculum changes in higher ed, it has to be done before the semester starts. So it just I don't know, I know higher ed's different than this, but it does concern me that we're talking about curriculum changes that affect students that are currently in school, and whether or not they need to be approved or whatever is a little concerning to me. And more importantly, the time that the teachers need to prepare to run these programs, because there are changes as detailed tonight, and they need to be ready to be in front of our children and run the program in an effective way. So that does concern me. The other thing that I'm concerned about is what I perceive as a pretty major change in the percent of population served. As Mr. Chu pointed out, it's 5% is the minimum. If you do the math on that, if we have 20 to 25 kids in a grade level, that means one student, 5% of 20 is one student, would qualify for LEAP. That feels like it completely takes the wind out of the program, completely undermines the whole point of group work, of doing work. I think Clinton mentioned earlier, like the idea of like it not just being academic work, it being things that are, things like, working in a group to figure out how to, to build the structure or the shelter, and those things are happening in a very different way if you have one student doing that. And so I think the idea of increasing that, and I looked back, and the current requirements that are on the website say that it's 20%. The top 20% would be in the program as of today and the previous year. So I don't know why we're moving it back to 5% at minimum. I think that really goes against, I think, even the idea of I get that more people can be identified through the testing, and I get that the what is it called, the OLSAT or whatever that is, sounds like an interesting test. I get that other people that may not have been identified in the past could be identified. I think that's all great. But I do I am concerned about, and I understand that the learning specialists, or LASs, I guess, LASs, are meant to help students with academic needs that they have and keep people moving throughout. I get that. That all sounds really great to me. But I think when we're talking about serving students, and if you look at the Haddonfield, sorry to use the H word, but if you look at they recently revised their gifted and talented program, and their information's on their website. They're not trying to identify gifted students, they're identifying gifted behavior, right? So gifted behavior is curiosity. Gifted behavior is focus and passion in your work and things along those lines. And I think that's what we did a good job of identifying previously, up until this year. And we may do a good job of identifying it, but I am a little concerned that we're sort of trying to reduce the number of people that would have the access to this kind of program. I think 20% was really a wonderful, a relatively inclusive program, very different than programs than other places that I've heard of. And I feel like we're kind of taking a step back. And I don't think, when I read the New Jersey regulations and the new rule, I don't see anything that says we can't do 20% in our district.
Thank you, Mr. Demasi.
Oh, was that 5 minutes?
It's been 5 minutes.
Okay, so thanks again, everyone, for the time and the opportunity to give feedback.
Seeing that there isn't anyone else, I just did want to clarify, I don't believe that we need to vote on any of the new gifted and talented programs. This was a presentation for us, but it's going into effect. That's, the board doesn't need to vote on that specifically. So, so at least to answer that part of your question that we had immediately. Okay, moving along to section 8, the superintendent's report. Dr. McDowell.
Section 8.01, student enrollment for September of 2021 was 2,270. As of September of 2022 is 2,295. 8.02 is the school safety drill report, which is attached. 8.03 are the suspension reports dated for September. And 8.04 is the HIB report for October. And that concludes. Mr. Demasi actually stole my thunder because I was going to share that I actually wrote it down. We wanted to publicly acknowledge the Phillies and how excited everybody is about the World Series coming to our region.
We already have the student reports, so section 10, the business administrator board secretary report. Ms. Coleman.
All right. So this evening in item 10.01 is a listing of your September monthly budget transfers. 10.02 is your board secretary treasurer's report and your cash report. 10.03 is your student activity cash report. 10.04 is your food service financial statements for the months of August and September. 10.05 is a listing of the purchase orders that have been issued during the month of October, and 10.06 is a listing of the warrants to be paid tomorrow morning upon your approval.
Thank you. Section 11, the Buildings, Grounds, and Finance Committee. Mr. Craig.
Thank you. The Finance, Buildings, and Grounds Committee reviews all financial statements, purchase orders, and warrants on a monthly basis. The committee also reviews and approves all contracts with outside service providers and oversees all maintenance and capital improvement projects district-wide. 11.2 to 11.9 is the board secretary's report that was just presented. 11.10 is the donation of a trumpet to the elementary music school program from Mr. Chris McCarter. Thank you, Mr. McCarter. 11.11 is a shared maintenance service agreement with the Clementon Board of Education. This is a partnership that we've had in years past. We're just getting around to approving the language and everything now. 11.12 is the shared custodial maintenance agreement. I'm sorry. This is with the borough. I thought, I've been prepping myself this whole time not to mess up, and it only took, what, 3? Yes, this is renewing with the borough to, on an as-needed basis, help with custodial services at the borough building, specifically the fire and police, correct? Yes. 1113 is a contract with Therapy Source to provide speech therapy services while our speech therapist is currently out on leave. 1114 is a contract with TEC Inc. to provide services and evaluations on an as-needed basis this year. 1115 is cool. We've been awarded a grant of $4,000 for the Special Olympics for our school, so kids in our school will be able to take part in Special Olympic competitions with other neighboring schools. And I wrote down again, and Angelina Williams, secured this for us, so thank you for that. Very cool opportunity for our kids. 1116 is approval of a professional development for our CST staff and instructional assistants from the New Jersey Coalition of Inclusive Education. 1117 is our comprehensive maintenance plan for this school year. 18 and 19 are amendments to the ARP IDEA grant, and then our 2022-2023 IDEA grants. 1120 is approval of the lease of the former Good Shepherd Regional Catholic School, which I'll talk a little bit more, but would be starting in November, running for 2 years, with extensions of 2 years. And then 1121 is a resolution around that lease and asking our architect of record, Garrison, to submit the lease to the New Jersey Department of Education for approval, also to amend our long-range facilities plan, and then to have the project above be approved as a capital project. So seeking approval from 11.2 to 11.21.
Is there a motion? And a second.
Second.
Questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor? Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry? Yes. Ms. Mello? Yes. Mrs. Sheridan Celia? Yes. Mr. Stotts?
Yes, but I abstain on item 11.20.
Mr. Bowman? Mrs. Caden?
Yes. Moving on to section 12, the curriculum committee. Ms. Henry.
The Curriculum Committee oversees and approves the district curriculum and assessment programs, as well as field trips, home instruction, co-curricular programs, and the school calendar. We have a brief schedule tonight on items 12.02, 12.03, and 12.04 are elementary, middle school, and high school field trips. Item 12.05 is our home instruction and out-of-district placement, and item 12.06 seeks the approval of this year's counseling plan. So the Curriculum Committee recommends approval of items 2.02 through 12.02 through 12.06.
Is there a motion? And a second. Questions or comments from board members?
I did want to make a comment about the field trips. I have had some folks ask me about field trips, especially at the elementary level, in terms of when we'll be able to get back to more, I guess, pre-pandemic type of field trips, around maybe to Philadelphia or elsewhere. And there's something I'd asked earlier within committee, and I just did want to mention that the information that I received was that the prices for transportation, I think it was also brought up by the German exchange program, are still exceedingly high, and that there are many enriching options for field trips within Collingswood proper that hopefully the elementary schools will continue to partake in and bring our students to, and hopefully at some point in the near future we can resume a little farther flung field trips for students.
So that's correct. So in my, I've been meeting with groups of students, And in one of the discussions, we talked about field trips. We talked about the importance of experiential learning. Just to give you kind of an indication on the hike, we've seen about a 60% increase in transportation costs over the last 18 months. It's just unsustainable. And the funding has not increased by 60%. So with our older students, one of the things that they brought up, which I will be presenting to all of the administrators, at least at the secondary level, is can we get more creative with the utilization of public transportation or regional transportation in order to make sure the students are receiving the benefit. And that was the crux of our conversation about how do we get back to that place.
I would add too that a CDL bus driver, the rate has gone from $19 an hour to $35 an hour in the last about 12 months. So I can understand that aspect of it. A lot of the institutions also will come to us, which I think a lot of times teachers don't, they want to go out, which I understand, but a lot of the museums have field trips to go, and they will bring a number of items here to add curriculum enhancements right on site. It's just sometimes it's significantly cheaper. It might be like $300 versus $700 just for the bus.
Any other questions or comments from board members? It's really loud. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry? Ms. Mello?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia? Mr. Stotts?
Yes, except those items marked with a double asterisk where I abstain.
Mr. Bowman? Mrs. Caden?
Yes. Moving on to section 13, the Personnel Committee, Ms. Sheridan Celia.
The Personnel Committee reviews all recommendations for teaching and staff employment, considers co-curricular employment, and considers all professional development opportunities for staff members. The first two items on the agenda, 13.02 and 13.03, are retirements. The first is Cynthia Evans. The second is Grace Menino. Items 13.04 through 13.07 are resignations. Items 13.08 through 13.10 are 3 new hires. Items 13.11 and through 13.12 are 2 leaves of absence. 13.13 is for the retention of Diane Medina doing translation services as needed basis. 13.14 through 13.17 are the various levels of PLC leaders at the elementary, middle school, high school, and district staff respectively. 13.18 through 13.24 are 4 various degrees of stipends. The first one is high school athletic EDP stipends at 13.18. 13.19 are high school non-athletic stipends. 13.20, Special Olympics staff stipends. 13.21 are this year into 2023 MTSS curriculum writing. 13.22 through 13.24 are 3 other curriculum development stipends, which were amended. 13.25 is lunch coverage for elementary and secondary school, setting the rates. 13.26, lunchtime assistance. 13.27, approving Sharp Elementary family liaisons. 13.28, district bus drivers, setting that rate. 13.29, student-teacher practicum placement at the middle school. 13.30 is a listing of substitutes and tutors. 13.31 is the approval of the travel expense form. And this evening, we're seeking approval of items 13.02 through 13.34.
It's 13.31.
I'm sorry, you're
That's all right,
absolutely
just want to
correct.
make sure we had it correct.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve those items?
So moved.
And a second? Questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry? Ms. Mello? Ms. Sheridan Celia?
Yes.
Mr. Stotts?
Yes, except those items marked with a double asterisk where I abstain.
Mr. Bowman? Mrs. Caden?
Yes. Section 14 is our Policies and Regulations Committee, but we do not have any for this evening, so we're moving on to Section 15, Miscellaneous. 15.01, there is not a HIB report from the previous month. 15.02 is the 2022-23 standing orders governing the treatment in case of emergencies that our, what is it called, our doctor puts together, right? District physician, thank you. 15.03 is this year's nursing plan. And 15.04 is a job description for a preschool induction coordinator that I'm assuming is similar to the positions for elementary induction coordinator and secondary induction coordinator, so just aligning all of that, and it will be a current preschool teacher that would fill that role. Okay. So do I have a motion to approve items 15.02 to 15.04?
So moved.
And a second? Questions or comments from board members? Roll call.
Can I ask a question before you start that, just to make sure?
Sure.
On 1504, we're approving a job description. We're not approving filling that position, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor? Yes. Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry? Ms. Mello? Mrs. Sheridan Celia? Mr. Stotts?
Yes.
Mr. Bowman? Mrs. Caden?
Yes. Moving on to section 16 is our next opportunity for public participation. If you would like to make a comment, please state your name and address and keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Seeing as no one is standing up, we're going to move to section 17, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for staying for this whole meeting and for the great discussion tonight.